Clink, clink. Alongside the dull, thunderous rattle of wheels against rails, a pungent mix of cheap tobacco, sweat, and unwashed feet flooded straight into her nostrils. Xingxia jolted awake amid the sweltering summer heat. The moment she opened her eyes, chills washed over her body and cold sweat streamed ceaselessly down her forehead. Her limbs felt limp as noodles, her heart pounded wildly, and even lifting her eyelids cost her tremendous effort. These were clear symptoms of severe low blood sugar. Without sugar soon, she feared she would lose consciousness entirely. Vast chunks of foreign memories forced their way into her mind. She had transmigrated into a novel. She had taken over the body of her namesake, an educated youth sent down to an island in the 1970s. The original girl had been raised in luxury, sheltered and pampered by her family. Her cruel stepmother had secretly signed her up for rural education behind everyone's back. After 3 days and nights of jolting travel on the slow green, skinned train, the original host had not even managed a sip of water. Her body gave out, and Xingxia, a modern-day heiress who had died from overwork, now inhabited this frame. Before Xingxia could sort through her situation, a rough shove came from beside her, brimming with brute force. "Move over, squeeze in. What's a young girl hogging so much space for?" A stout, yellow-toothed middle-aged woman heaved her bulk inward. Already weak, Xingxia was slammed hard against the grimy, icy train window. This woman was Wang Suihua. Her narrow triangular eyes glinted with greed, fixed intently on the cloth bundle Xingxia clutched tightly to her chest. Inside that yellow tattered cloth bag lay everything the original girl owned, plus a precious ancestral jade pendant kept as a memento. "Goodness, this bag looks heavy. What treasures have you got in there? Let me hold it for you so you won't tire yourself out." Muttering away, Wang Suihua stretched out grubby fingers with black, caked nails and yanked hard at the bundle. Under ordinary circumstances, Xingxia would not have spared such a person a glance. But this frail body lacked even the strength to call for help. Gritting her teeth, she half-closed her eyes and called upon her special ability in her mind. A massive independent spatial realm unfolded within her consciousness. It was the 10-story billion-dollar shopping mall she had owned in her past life, suspended neatly deep in her thoughts. The ground floor held groceries and general merchandise. The second floor housed a full-scale pharmacy. The third floor was for clothing and household goods. Shelves glittered with all kinds of modern supplies. Her mental gaze swept across the sterile pharmacy on the second floor. Packaging peeled away silently inside the space, and an ultra-fine specialized acupuncture needle materialized softly in her palm. Though sharp enough to sting, it would leave no visible wound. Seeing Xingxia sit motionless with eyes shut, Wang Suihua assumed the sickly young woman was on the verge of collapse. She pulled harder at the sack, her thick flesh quivering with eager excitement. "Hee, this little bag is mine now." The instant Wang Suihua's dirty hands were about to tear the bundle completely free, Xiaxia's concealed fingers flicked sharply beneath her sleeve. The tiny steel needle glinted almost imperceptibly, landing precisely on a nerve point on Wang Suihua's hip. "Aya!" A shrill, ear-piercing shriek exploded across the crowded carriage. Dust shook loose from the ceiling. The noisy compartment fell abruptly quiet. Wang Suihua leaped like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, clutching her hip with both hands and stamping frantically in the narrow aisle. "Something's wrong. Something pricked me." She burned bright red with pain. Numbness spread rapidly down one of her thighs, robbing it of feeling. Passengers around her stared in bewilderment. "What's wrong with that woman? There's nothing supernatural here." "Exactly. She just wanted to steal the girl's seat and is putting on a ridiculous show. Shameful." Tears streamed down Wang Suihua's face. Where she had been pricked, her flesh tingled as though jolted by static, completely unresponsive to touch. The second Wang Suihua jumped, Xingxia tossed the needle back into her spatial storage. She hugged the cloth bundle firmly, leaned limply against the window, and allowed tears of physical strain to glisten on her long lashes. Breathing shallowly, her face deathly pale, she looked utterly helpless. The large portion of seat Wang Suihua had seized was hers once more. Wang Suihua kept wailing and even began staggering about on the floor. Her racket finally roused the man sitting opposite her, who had been covering his face with a military cap to sleep. Long, sturdy legs rested casually over the edge of the seat, clad in dusty black high-top military boots. A large, calloused hand slowly lifted the cap away. Beneath it appeared a strikingly handsome face, rugged and intimidating. Deep, sharp dark eyes narrowed, annoyed at being disturbed, and swept coldly over the scene. Wang Suihua hobbled away. One hip and thigh remained numb and lifeless, making her lurch unevenly like a clumsy waddling bird. Ugh, this is terrible. There must be a hidden sharp needle on the seat, she ranted, still pressing hard against her hip as she stumbled toward the lavatory at the end of the carriage. Other passengers edged away, repelled by her rank smell. Peace finally returned. Xingxia slid weakly down against the filthy window, still looking barely able to hold on to consciousness. She held the cloth bundle tight across her chest, staying on guard. Meanwhile, her consciousness slipped effortlessly into her mall space. Far from the sweltering, foul carriage, the vast 10-story shopping mall was cool and clean. She zeroed in on a sterile refrigerated cabinet beside the liquor counter. A 500-milliliter glass of clear spiritual spring water waited there, giving off faint cool wisps. Shielded by her cloth bundle, she flicked her wrist, and the cool water appeared in her grasp. Bowing her head behind the bag, she drank the whole glass in one go. Sweet liquid slid down her throat. Her wildly hammering heart steadied. Cold sweat dried up, and her ice-cold fingers slowly regained warmth. Water alone could not satisfy her hunger. Soon her stomach rumbled loudly. Her mental gaze roamed over the food court on the second floor of the mall. There was freshly prepared coconut chicken soup, golden oil floating atop clear broth, the fragrant aroma of coconut meat blending perfectly with tender chicken. She carefully pulled out a chipped enamel mug, pretending she had taken it from her cloth sack. While her hands fumbled inside the bag, she willed the steaming, fragrant coconut chicken soup to fill the mug. Eyes lowered, she sipped slowly. Warm nourishment flowed through every part of her body. Bit by bit, a faint pink tint bloomed across the original host's ashen cheeks, like budding peach blossoms in spring. Xingxia was enjoying her soup when she sensed a heavy, pressing gaze fixed upon her. Her eyelashes trembled, and she lifted her eyes slightly to meet the man across from her. He had fully removed his military cap. He wore faded but clean army fatigues. 2 buttons at the collar were undone, revealing a strip of tanned, taut muscle. Standing close to 190 centimeters tall, his long legs barely fit within the cramped train compartment. Leaning one hand on his knee, he watched her intently, his dark eyes deep and probing. Xingxia's heart skipped a beat. As a former business heiress, her instincts warned her this man was dangerous. He carried the faint aura of someone who had seen real combat on the battlefield. Worse still, his nose twitched subtly. The carriage reeked of countless unpleasant odors, yet the rich, sweet scent of coconut and chicken drifted between their seats, wildly out of place for this shabby train. Even behind her mug and cloth bundle, the sharp-nosed veteran could detect it. Jiangji raised an eyebrow. He had already noticed the delicate-looking girl across from him. Her fair complexion stood out sharply among the weathered common travelers aboard. While the stout woman had caused her commotion, Jiangji, hidden under his cap, had caught the quick, tricky movement of Xingxia's hand, inconsistent with her frail, gasping act. Now this girl who had seemed moments from collapse was sipping steaming soup from an enamel mug. Not even the best chefs of the state-run provincial hotel could produce such a tantalizing aroma. On this train where hot water was scarcely available, where could she have gotten hot soup? Her cloth sack was far too flat to hold a thermos. Jiangji's gaze traveled from her newly flushed, fine-featured face down toward the mug she guarded. Xingxia shifted uncomfortably, drawing the mug closer to her chest to block his line of sight. A flicker of amusement crossed his dark eyes, like a predator quietly observing small prey. Nervous, she swallowed and decided to play innocent. She widened her almond-shaped eyes, filling them with confusion and naivety, and looked back at him. Jiangji studied her watery gaze, tapping his fingers lightly against his knee. Clever girl, putting on quite a convincing performance. The scent of coconut chicken grew stronger. Xiaxia's scalp prickled under his unrelenting scrutiny. Her disguise felt ready to unravel. Jaw set, she prepared to tuck the enamel mug back into her sack to end this silent standoff. Before she could move, heavy, hurried footsteps echoed down the aisle, accompanied by the harsh scrape of rubber soles on metal flooring. Thud, thud, thud. Here she is. Comrade Wang, you have to stand up for me. Wang Suihua's coarse voice boomed once more. Xingxia paused and turned her head. Wang Suihua hobbled forward, still favoring her sore hip. Behind her marched a tall, square-jawed train attendant in uniform. His cap sat askew, and he advanced toward Shengxia's seat with a grim, hostile expression. "This is her. Wang Dazhu, you must defend your aunt." Wang Suihua shouted, jabbing her finger almost against Shengxia's nose. Wang Dazhu, the attendant, planted his hands on his belt, looking authoritative. Drowsy passengers perked up, craning their necks for the spectacle. He glanced down at Xingxia, seeing her thin frame, pale complexion, and tight grip on her tattered bundle, disdain clear in his eyes. "Did you carry concealed weapons aboard this train and injure a working-class citizen?" He slammed his palm hard against the small marble tabletop, rattling teacups. Wang Suihua, emboldened by her nephew's support, spat on the floor and yelled, "Exactly. Dressed so nicely, she's nothing but a spoiled bourgeois young lady. I only wanted to squeeze in beside her, and she secretly jabbed my hip with a needle. Half my leg is still numb. She could be using poison needles. This is sabotage." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. In this era, labels like saboteur and bourgeois young lady carried devastating weight, capable of ruining a person's whole future. She looks so gentle. How could she do such a cruel thing? Educated youths were sent to the countryside for re-education, yet she throws such privileged tantrums. Refusing to give up her seat and attacking someone, disgraceful. Accusatory eyes bore down on Xingxia. She lowered her lashes, hiding cold scorn. Moral manipulation? She had dealt with far worse schemers in the business world. Still, she kept up her act. When she lifted her face again, tears pooled in her almond eyes. Her thin frame trembled inside her oversized coat. "I didn't do anything," she whimpered, voice small and teary, shrinking against the window. "I was gravely ill before leaving for the countryside. After 3 days of travel on this train, I barely drank a drop of water. This woman shoved me and tried to snatch my cloth bundle. It holds my late mother's keepsakes." Tears rolled down her pale cheeks. Wang Dazhu frowned, partly convinced by her vulnerable appearance. But remembering the 2 caddies of sugar Wang Suihua had promised him, his expression hardened again. "Quit pretending to be pitiful. A respected working-class woman would never falsely accuse you." He pulled out a small notebook, tone arrogant. "Young educated, youth comrade, you refuse to yield your seat and are suspected of assault. You will give up the seat and pay 10 yuan in compensation, or I will hand you over to the railway police. They will report your conduct to your receiving brigade, and you will spend your days cleaning pigsties." 10 yuan was an enormous sum. An ordinary worker earned barely more than 20 yuan per month. No passenger dared speak out against the attendant, even thinking the demand excessive. Wang Suihua's fat face twisted with greed. "Pay up. Give her your seat," she shrieked. Losing patience, she lunged forward, dirty nails reaching for Xingxia's hair. "I'll teach this stuck-up city girl a lesson." Seeing those filthy hands closing in, a cold glint flashed deep in Xingxia's eyes. Her mind connected with the self-defense section on the 3rd floor of her spatial mall. A brand new high-voltage stun gun hummed ready under her mental control. If those nails touched her, she would unleash its effect. Amid the chaos, she could easily claim the woman had suffered a sudden fit. Xingxia narrowed her eyes, tracking the incoming hand, her fingers tensed beneath her sleeve. The air in the carriage grew taut. Wang Suihua's sharp nails drew closer to Xingxia's soft face. 10 centimeters. 8 centimeters. Click. The military cap across from them shifted softly. The towering silent man slowly stood. His massive frame blocked much of the dim overhead light. The noisy carriage quieted, weighed down by his imposing aura. Wang Suihua's hand was mid-swing when a large, calloused palm shot out, clamping iron, tight around her thick, dirt-stained wrist. A dull grinding sound of bone echoed above the hubbub. Wang Suihua let out an unearthly scream. It hurts. Let go. My wrist is breaking." Her heavy body sagged toward the floor, cold sweat pouring down her forehead. Seeing his aunt injured, Wang Dazhu's features contorted. He reached for the whistle at his waist. "What are you doing? Assaulting railway staff aboard the train? You are out of line." The man's icy gaze swept over Wang Dazhu without warmth. Before the whistle could sound, he lifted his heavy sand-dusted military boot and kicked hard. Boom! The 180-centimeter attendant flew backward like a tattered sack, crashing heavily into a red, painted garbage bin full of rotting fruit peels near the aisle. The bin toppled with a clang, spilling rotten vegetable scraps and waste over his head and shoulders. Complete silence fell across the carriage. Onlookers shrank back, too intimidated to breathe loudly. Wang Suihua broke down, tears and snot streaming down her face. She clutched her nearly dislocated wrist and collapsed onto the ground, trembling. Jiangji did not even spare the two people on the ground a glance. Calm-faced, he pulled a red, covered document from the pocket of his green military uniform jacket. He tapped the cover lightly with his finger and held it out before Wang Dazhu. Jiangji, accompanying staff for military classified defense operations. Jiangji looked down at the man struggling inside the trash bin. His deep voice carried unyielding authority. You stirred up trouble aboard a military, assigned vehicle, attempted to undermine military, civilian unity, and damaged national defense supplies. He took back the document and tucked it slowly into his pocket. Would you prefer to be sent to the nearest garrison military court, or have your work unit at the Railway Bureau notified for formal dismissal from your post? Wang Dazhu had just pulled his head out of the trash bin. At the words military court and dismissal, he shuddered all over. Though merely a low-ranking train attendant, he knew how substantial military authority was in this era. Moreover, the faint aura of hardship and sharp intensity about the man made it plain he had seen real combat. It's a misunderstanding, all just a misunderstanding, Comrade Liberation Army soldier. I was merely doing my duty. Wang Dazhu's legs turned weak. He scrambled unsteadily to his feet, paying no mind to wiping the filth from his face. He roughly hauled Wang Suihua, who had been feigning unconsciousness on the ground, to her feet, his voice shaking violently. We're leaving right this instant. Wang Suihua forgot all about her sore bottom. Terrified out of her wits, she limped along behind Wang Dazhu toward the rear carriage. A short silence fell over the carriage, followed by thunderous applause. Truly, nothing beats our Liberation Army comrades. Exactly. That woman was completely unreasonable. She got exactly what she deserved. The passengers swiftly shifted their stance. Jiangji paid no heed to the commotion. He turned his dark, sharp eyes settling once more on the young girl by the window. Shangxia blinked back tears she had forced out earlier, looking thoroughly pitiful. She knew this was the perfect chance to gain his protection. If she let this opportunity slip, she might well run into more trouble once they got off the train. Taking a deep breath, she let her lips tremble and her body sway as if she could no longer hold herself upright. Her movement looked entirely natural. Her head, carrying hints of herbal and sweet fragrance, came to rest lightly against Jiangji's hard shoulder. A fresh, sweet scent, reminiscent of coconut milk mixed with ripe peach, washed over Jiangji. It stood in stark contrast to the carriage thick with pipe, tobacco smoke and sweat. Jiangji's tall frame stiffened abruptly. Every muscle tense like forged iron, and his breath caught for a heartbeat. Shangxia appeared oblivious. She lifted her fair, skinned small hands and gently rubbed her swollen wrist, letting out soft, quiet whimpers. Brother Jiangji, that frightened me terribly. I feel so dizzy. Her soft, delicate voice brushed against his nerves. Jiangji glanced down. From his angle, he could see her slender neck and her flushed, peach-like cheeks. His rough, large hands tightened and relaxed at his sides, faint sweat forming on his palms. The girl was as fragile as fine porcelain. Delicate, soft-spoken, and bold enough to lean against him so readily. Jiangji turned his head away, his Adam's apple bobbing repeatedly beneath his tanned neck. After a long moment, he subdued the strange restlessness rising within him. He shifted his shoulder, his tone stiff, as if forced out from deep in his throat. Do not try to grow too familiar with me. Do not try to grow too familiar with me. Jiangji's voice was hard and unyielding, like an iron stoveplate left unused for 3 years in a supply and marketing cooperative. He shifted his tall body further away, folded his arms across his chest, and stared out the carriage window. 5 minutes had barely passed before he could no longer sit still. Across from him, the slight young girl fidgeted restlessly on the hard green wooden seat. She shifted her hips and rubbed her legs, her newly regained pink complexion fading into a small frown once more. Jiangji's brows drew tight. Without a word, he stood up, his broad figure blocking most of the dim overhead lamp's light. Shangxia had been complaining inwardly about how the hard seat bruised her hips when darkness fell over her field of vision. A thick military overcoat, clean though faded, carrying the dry scent of pine needles, was placed beneath her. Use this for padding. With those 2 words, Jiangji stepped across and seated himself in the empty spot beside her, his gaze fixed firmly on the aisle. Shangxia blinked. The heavy overcoat still retained his body warmth, soft and comforting beneath her. "Thank you, brother Jiangji." She tilted her head, her voice sweet as honey. The man's body visibly tensed, his folded arms clenching involuntarily. Night fell, and the carriage grew cold. Shangxia's throat felt parched, and she coughed softly. The man beside her opened his eyes. Without uttering a word, he picked up her chipped enamel mug and walked toward the boiling water tap at the carriage connection. Shortly afterward, he returned carrying 2 mugs of steaming hot water. Shangxia reached out to take hers, but his calloused, coarse hands moved out of the way. "It's hot." Jiangji's low voice rang clear in the dimness. He poured water back and forth between the 2 enamel mugs. Steam curled in the faint lamplight. His movements were steady, not a single drop spilled despite his rough palms. Only when the outer surface of the mug turned lukewarm did he hand it over. "Drink." Shangxia held the warm mug and sipped slowly. An older woman wearing a headscarf leaned over, watching them with a smile. "Young comrade, your husband certainly knows how to take good care of you. Are you newlyweds heading to join the army settlement?" Shangxia nearly choked on her water. She was about to explain when Jiangji spoke first. "Auntie, please do not say that. We have not gone through the formal marriage procedures yet." His expression remained impassive, yet beneath the dim lamplight, the tips of his ears had turned bright red. Seeing his obvious fluster, Shangxia's almond eyes crinkled into crescents. She leaned subtly closer and lowered her voice. "Brother Jiangji, why are your ears so red?" Jiangji went rigid. He drew a deep breath, closed his eyes, and uttered 2 brusque words. "It's stuffy in here." It was the depth of winter. Frost coated the train windows, yet he told such an obvious lie. The elderly woman sat cracking melon seeds and observing them for the rest of the night. Jiangji sat ramrod, straight, not closing his eyes for even a moment. On the 3rd morning, the train whistled loudly and ground to a halt. Salt, tinged sea breeze filled the air. Seagull Island. They had arrived. Strong wind whipped across the dock. Shangxia shrank her neck as soon as she stepped off the train. Jiangji carried both of her large suitcases, walking silently ahead of her. His tall frame acted like a moving windbreak, shielding her from the bitter gusts. "I am reporting to the garrison. You will take that ox-drawn cart over to the educated youth compound." Jiangji set the luggage down and pointed toward an old ox cart in the distance. Shangxia looked up at the man who had watched over her all the way. She bit her lower lip gently, her large eyes soft with reluctance. "Brother Jiangji, when will you come see me?" Jiangji looked at her fair, porcelain-like face. Amid the shabby, chaotic dock, she seemed like a gentle being misplaced from a better world. "I will come when I have time." Jiangji's voice was still gruff, yet noticeably softer than it had been on the train. He fumbled inside his pocket as if searching for something, but in the end merely wiped his palm against the hem of his uniform jacket. "Brother Jiangji, let's pinky swear." Shangxia held out her slender white little finger toward him. Jiangji stared at that thin pale finger, something stirring gently inside his chest. He did not extend his own hand, only mumbled a reply. "I must go." He turned and strode toward the military jeep, heavy leather boots thudding solidly against the muddy ground. Shangxia stood watching his retreating back, the corners of her mouth lifting. This gruff man grew more likable by the minute. "Xia, is it really you?" A sharp, urgent female voice cut through the noisy dock. Shangxia smoothed away her smile and turned toward the sound. A young woman in heavily patched dusty, blue clothing, mud splattered on her trouser legs, hurried toward her. Her hair was dry and yellow, her complexion sallow from long-term hard labor. Yet her narrow eyes glinted with unpleasant, greedy light. It was Lin Wei, her cousin from the original host's family. A reborn woman. In Lin Wei's past life, the original host had grown wealthy and became a leading business figure, all thanks to an ancestral jade pendant around her neck. "Xia, you've finally arrived." Lin Wei pushed through the crowd and reached her side. She smiled falsely and reached for Shangxia's hand. Shangxia stepped subtly backward, evading her dirt-caked fingers. Lin Wei's hand hung awkwardly mid-air, her smile freezing. Very quickly, her gaze locked onto Shangxia's collar. Beneath it hung the ancestral jade pendant that could open a multi-layered spatial storehouse. Greed and resentment blazed almost visibly in her eyes. Inside the mud-walled courtyard of the educated youth compound, newly Arrived educated youths clambered down from the ox cart and hauled their luggage. What a dreadful place. Mud everywhere, barely anywhere to set foot. Stop complaining. I've heard typhoons strike here often. Having a roof over our heads is already good fortune. The young people rubbed their aching limbs and stared at the low run-down adobe houses, their hearts sinking. Shang Xia stood beside the ox cart, brushing dust off her clothes, wincing slightly at her still, swollen wrist. Thoughts of the tall, stiff, mannered man from the train tugged a faint smile onto her lips. Before she could collect her thoughts, that same sharp, urgent voice cut across the crowd. Xia Xia, truly you. You're finally here. Shang Xia dropped her smile and turned. Lin Wei hurried over, dressed in a dusty, blue tunic splattered with mud, trouser legs rolled high and stained with filth from pigsties or muddy ground. Her hair was brittle and yellow, her skin sallow after months of grueling island labor. Greed and envy burned plainly in her narrow eyes. Lin Wei headed straight for Shang Xia and stretched out her hands to grab her. Shang Xia took a quiet small step backward, dodging her grimy fingernails. Lin Wei's grasp met empty air, and her smile stiffened. Her eyes latched onto Shang Xia's tightly fastened collar. She knew the precious jade pendant that unlocked a vast multi-level storage space rested there. She recalled the previous life, how Shang Xia had enjoyed abundant fine food and nice clothes inside her spatial storehouse, eventually becoming a highly respected wealthy figure. Meanwhile, Lin Wei, misled by her stepmother, had suffered bitter cold and illness in the northwest and died destitute. Bitterness and jealousy gnawed at her heart. Now that she had been reborn, that space belonged to her, Lin Wei. Xia Xia, you must be worn out from the journey. Let me look at you. Lin Wei composed a fake warm smile and raised her voice so every educated youth in the yard could hear. Before my aunt passed away, she held my hand and begged me repeatedly. She said you have always been frail and naive, incapable of keeping precious belongings safe. She insisted I must safeguard your ancestral jade pendant left by your maternal grandmother while you are out in the countryside. This Seagull Island has a complicated population. With so many people working together, valuables can easily go missing. If that heirloom were lost, it would be a terrible loss to our collective. My aunt would never rest in peace in the afterlife. All the youths sweeping floors and carrying crates stopped what they were doing and turned to watch. Lin Wei's follower Zhongli, holding a tattered broom nearby, stepped forward and chimed in sarcastically. So this is the cousin Lin Wei always talks about. What soft, delicate skin, just like a pampered bourgeois young lady. Since your cousin is being so thoughtful, hand over the pendant quickly. Don't bring shame down on our educated youth compound. Some newly arrived, naive youths nodded, thinking Lin Wei was a caring, responsible older cousin. Lin Wei rejoiced inwardly. Moral pressure was her strongest tool. In this era, labels like bringing shame on the collective or being pampered could ruin a person's reputation. As she rejoiced, she strode forward, her dirty hand reaching roughly for Shang Xia's collar. Hand it over now. I'm only doing this for your own good. Do not be ungrateful. A sour stench wafted from her fingernails. Shang Xia watched her shameless eagerness with cold inner contempt. Did Lin Wei think she could bully her at will? Rebirth had not improved her poor judgment. She believed merely seizing an artifact would grant her easy prosperity. As a modern day heir to a business empire familiar with schemes to rob vulnerable people of their inheritance, Shang Xia had prepared thoroughly back on the train. She had bought a cheap glass imitation jade pendant, identical in pattern and color to the real heirloom, and hung it around her neck. The genuine spiritual jade holding the spatial storehouse was safely stored inside the sterile storage cabinet within her space, untouched by dust. Since Lin Wei was determined to walk straight into her trap, Shang Xia would play along. As Lin Wei's hand neared her collar, Shang Xia's long eyelashes fluttered violently. Her fair face drained of all color. Tears welled up in her almond eyes, hanging on the verge of spilling over, lending her a thoroughly helpless, vulnerable look. She trembled as if terrified, staggering backward like a willow swaying in bitter wind. Cousin, why are you trying to snatch my possession in front of everyone? Her soft, tear-thickened voice carried clearly across the quiet courtyard. When my mother was dying, I stayed right beside her bed. She held my own hand and told me this pendant was her last keepsake for me, to be worn close to my neck and never given to anyone. How can you claim my aunt told you to keep it safe for me? She clutched her collar tightly, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. Her fragile, wronged appearance moved all onlookers. You claim you act for my benefit, yet you grab at me so roughly, nearly scratching my neck open. You invoke my late mother's name in public to force me to surrender my family heirloom. Could it be that under the pretense of safekeeping, you actually intend to seize my treasure for yourself? Her sharp rebuke landed like a slap across Lin Wei and Zhang Li's faces. The watching educated youths immediately changed their opinions. Truly, how rude Lin Wei was, frightening that new girl half to death. She says she wants to keep it safe, yet her late aunt supposedly never gave her such instructions. She obviously wants to steal the family treasure. How shameless. Trying to rob her own cousin's heirloom, that is nothing short of bandit behavior. Beneath the scornful murmurs, Lin Wei's face alternated between crimson and ashen, cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. She could scarcely believe it. In her past life, the sickly Shengxia had only wept and endured every grievance silently. Now she spoke with such sharp wit, shattering Lin Wei's carefully built image of the kind-hearted elder cousin. If she failed to seize the pendant today, opportunities would only grow scarcer once Shengxia adjusted to life in the compound. Exposed, Lin Wei lost her temper. Once more she lunged violently for Shengxia's neck, shouting, "I am doing this for your own good." Lin Wei's hand reeked of sharp, acrid stench that burned straight to Shengxia's brain. Shengxia stared at the dirty fingernails reaching toward her, sneering inwardly. Dealing with such a foolish, difficult person required not a single blow from her. She quietly scraped the tip of her toe against the slippery edge of the muddy ground, shifting her body almost imperceptibly to one side. The instant Lin Wei's fingertips were about to brush her collar, Shengxia was flung backward as though struck by a powerful force. Her feet skidded, and she let out a short, terrified cry. Then, in an elegant, frail motion, Shengxia tumbled straight backward toward a pile of jagged rubble. As she fell, the worn, thin, fragile red cord around her neck snapped cleanly. The glossy fake jade pendant, glowing harsh green, traced a perfect arc through the air. Plop! It crashed hard onto a sharp granite boulder in the middle of the yard. A crisp cracking sound rang out sharply in the quiet courtyard. The jade split cleanly into two halves, shards of green glass flying everywhere. Shengxia landed heavily on the mud, her nice trousers splattered with yellow muck, looking utterly wretched. Ignoring her soiled clothes, she scrambled over and clutched the two broken pieces in her palms. Large tears streamed down her face. Stop. My jade pendant, the one my mother left me. She sobbed brokenly, her thin shoulders heaving, huddled on the mud in a pitiable state. Cousin, even if you wanted my belongings, why did you have to smash it? Aunt Spirit is watching. How could you be so cruel? While weeping, she subtly pressed her red, swollen wrists against the shards, her fingertips digging into her skin to create marks that looked exactly like bruises from Lin Wei's rough grabbing. The watching educated youth stirred, many reproaching Lin Wei for her reckless violence. Lin Wei froze in place, hands still stretched out in the awkward posture of someone who had just pulled. Staring at the shattered family heirloom on the ground, she felt as if struck by lightning, her mind buzzing. Shattered? This spirit jade that unlocked a great shopping mall space, how could it break so easily? In her past life, Shengxia had worn it all the way to becoming a wealthy tycoon, and it had never been this fragile. Shocked and furious, Lin Wei lunged forward to snatch the fragments from Shengxia's hands. Stop putting on an act. This jade is fake. You smashed it yourself to frame me. Before she could close the distance, a roar boomed from the gate of the educated youth compound. Stop. Are you trying to rob her further? The shout was deep and thunderous, shaking loose dirt from the courtyard walls. Lin Wei flinched violently and halted mid-step. Two middle-aged men stood in the gateway. Leading them was Captain Zhao of High OU Island Brigade, draped in a tattered blue cloth jacket, his face dark as soot. Behind him trailed Aunt Li, the village gossip, holding a winnowing basket, her eyes bulging as she craned to peek at the broken jade in Shengxia's hands. When Captain Zhao stepped inside, he saw the pretty new educated youth huddled on the mud, weeping almost to the point of collapse. While Lin Wei looked menacing, reaching out as if to assault her. In broad daylight, you dare to rob another person's private property right here in the youth compound. This is no different from banditry of the old society. Captain Zhao slammed his palm against a wooden railing. As brigade captain, he cared deeply about public order. If higher-ups learned that fighting and theft had broken out among newly arrived educated youth, his position would be at risk. Captain, it is not like that. Please hear me out, Lin Wei panicked, waving her hands, her fake smile warping grotesquely. Aunt really told me before she passed away that I should keep it safe for her, since Xingxia cannot safeguard valuables. Lin Wei, do you take us all for fools? Zheng Li, who had been about to speak up for her, shrank behind a worn broom at Captain Zhao's furious glare. Aunt Li clicked her tongue and cut in with sarcastic undertones. Goodness gracious, Captain. This young educated youth behaves worse than our village idlers. Look, she nearly ripped the girl's collar, and those red welts on her wrists are plain to see. This is not safeguarding property. This is outright robbery. Aunt Li's words stoked Captain Zhao's anger higher. In this era, forcible seizure of private property could lead to arrest and transfer to county authorities if judged seriously. Xingxia sniffled, dabbing her reddened eyes, her voice thick with sobs. Captain, I do not want my cousin to keep it for me. Aunt told me to wear it close to my body. Now that it is broken, how can I face my grandmother when I return to the city? I do not know what I shall do. Her tearful plea drew looks of scorn and anger toward Lin Wei from the young male, educated youth watching nearby. Lin Wei's face alternated between green and white, barely holding back a surge of bitter rage. She could not believe that Xingxia, who had been meek and timid in her past life, had grown so cunning. She had orchestrated the Jade's destruction and pinned the label of robber on Lin Wei. Captain Zhao walked over to Xingxia, sighing with sympathy. Comrade Xingxia, get up. The brigade committee will see justice done. No one with bad ideological conduct will go unpunished. He spun around, his large eyes boring into Lin Wei. Comrade Lin Wei, you only recently came to the countryside. Instead of learning from the poor and lower, middle peasants, you bully and attempt to rob your cousin. Your ideological awareness is extremely lacking. To make you reflect deeply, the brigade committee rules, starting tomorrow, you will clean and carry night soil from all the pigsties of the youth compound for 1 full month. Carrying night soil? For an entire month. Lin Wei's vision swam. The pigsties at the youth compound were filthy, reeking of accumulated waste. In the sweltering summer heat, the stench alone could make people nauseous. After this work, her whole body would reek, and her hands would be ruined. Captain, I refuse. She framed me. She threw the jade down herself. Lin Wei shrieked in desperation. Silence. Everyone here saw what happened. Refusing to admit your wrongdoing shows terrible conduct. Captain Zhao cut her off sharply. A heavy weight seemed to crush Lin Wei's chest. 1 month hauling night, soil buckets. Yet as she stared at the 2 broken jade halves on the ground, a fanatical, greedy glint flickered across her eyes. The jade was shattered, but the space it held could not be destroyed. Perhaps this treasure required blood to re-establish its master, bond, or had to be reassembled to open the shopping mall gateway. Yes, that must be it. Lin Wei drew a deep breath, consumed by wild greed. If she could get hold of those broken fragments, 1 month of hauling night soil meant nothing. Inside the female dormitory of the educated youth compound, the sour, foul odor still lingered thick in the air. Lin Wei sat on the edge of the wide shared bed, scrubbing her rough hands repeatedly with water, her face twitching with suppressed rage. She had spent the whole day hauling pig, pen waste, and the smell seemed to have seeped into her skin, throbbing behind her temples. Zheng Li edged close, fanning the air before her nose, lowering her voice. Wei, you have suffered. This is all Shengxiao's fault. The brigade work, points recorder will assign new duties tomorrow. We have to think of something. She cannot get away with this. 2 other female, educated youth friendly with Lin Wei nodded, malicious light in their eyes. Lin Wei ground her back teeth, a vicious glint in her gaze. Tomorrow, ask Recorder Zhao to send her to till the barren hillside land, or make her carry night soil alongside me. That heavy labor will drain most of her strength in a single day. Let us see how she can show off after that. They huddled together whispering, their voices cold in the damp night. Xingxia, lying in the far corner, rolled over, her eyelashes fluttering faintly. Every word of their plotting reached her ears. She rolled her eyes beneath her quilt, a faint smile tugging at her lips. They wanted to assign her back, breaking hard labor? Like clay idols in a temple, they could not even save themselves, yet they still schemed against others. Early next morning, the sharp whistle blared across the compound on schedule. Captain Zhao and the work points recorders stood in the yard with a notebook, calling out assignments at the top of their voices. Zheng Li and Lin Wei exchanged glances, ready to approach the recorder to put in their word. Just then, the wooden door of Shang Xia's room creaked slowly open. Shang Xia leaned against the doorframe, her face as pale as whitewashed plaster, without a trace of color. One trembling hand supported her forehead, her lips quivering, barely able to speak. "Recorder Zhao, I truly cannot exert myself today." Her voice was thin, edged with quiet distress. "My legs cramp badly, spots dance before my eyes, and everything looks doubled. Low blood sugar has struck me, I can barely stand." As she spoke, she swayed convincingly, on the verge of collapsing. Two young male, educated youth hurried forward wanting to help, yet held back by propriety, pacing anxiously in place. Captain Zhao stepped over, looking at her delicate frame, so frail that a gust of wind might knock her over. And recalling her poor state at the docks days before, he worried. If he forced her to work and she collapsed in the fields, his position would be endangered. "Comrade Shang Xia, health is the foundation of revolutionary work. Rest indoors today, and your work points will not be deducted." Captain Zhao made the decision at once. Lin Wei nearly crushed the wash basin in her hands. She watched Shang Xia sniffle and retreat weakly into her room, anger choking her throat. Once the main group marched off with hose and night soil buckets, the compound fell quiet, leaving Shang Xia all alone. Instantly, Shang Xia bounced energetically off her bed, no trace of her earlier sickly appearance. She stretched widely, her joints cracking softly. "Trying to wear me down with moral pressure and grueling labor? In your dreams." She slipped on clean white canvas shoes and slung the original owner's yellowed bamboo basket over her shoulder. For disguise, she stuffed two hard black, flour-steamed buns inside. West of Hai, Oyu Island lay a jagged rocky shore locals called Devil's Reef Beach. Dangerous currents and hidden reefs kept even seasoned fishermen far away, fearing shipwreck. Yet for Shang Xia, this spot was perfect. Hardly anyone visited, so the local ecosystem remained untouched. Carrying her bamboo basket, she picked her way across slippery mud until she reached the innermost section of the reef beach. A large concave rock sheltered her completely from outside view. Sitting on a flat, clean stone, she focused her mind. And the vast shopping mall space unfolded in her consciousness. First, she pulled out a modern high-tech transparent anti-ultraviolet parasol. Once opened, its translucent surface made it look as though she merely sat in natural rock shade, concealing its true nature. Next, from the cold drink counter on the space's second floor, she fetched an ice-chilled coconut drink. Pouring the sweet, cool liquid into her chipped enamel mug, she sipped contentedly, her almond-shaped eyes half closed in satisfaction. While others slogged amid stinking pig waste, she sat by the sea breeze enjoying cold drinks. Life could not get much better. Still, relaxation alone would not earn her wealth. Setting down her mug, she reached into her cloth bag, using her mind to retrieve a small gray box from the electronics counter inside her space. It was a deep water sonar locator. This high-end modern fishery survey device was unimaginable in the 1970s when meat still required ration coupons. She pressed the power button. The screen beeped to life, glowing pale green. Rotating green scanning lines mapped the underwater terrain of Devil's Reef Beach, dots of red lighting up densely across the display marking living creatures hidden in reef crevices. Wow! Hi, Oyu Island's natural resources are incredible. Following the sonar readouts, she spotted large, slow-moving creatures gathered in a deep water trench right beneath where she sat. Far bigger than ordinary conch shells. She finished her coconut drink in one gulp, stowed her enamel mug, rolled up her trouser cuffs, and got ready to work. Guided precisely by the sonar, she needed no blind groping in sand and muck like ordinary fishermen. Every rich catch was visible on screen. Beep, beep, beep. Suddenly, one red dot in the corner of the sonar screen blared an urgent alert. It flashed rapidly, signaling an exceptionally large creature below. Guided by the trace, Shang Xia bent low and carefully crept toward a nearby rocky sea cave half a meter wide. The seawater inside was clear, shimmering under sunlight. Leaning forward, she peered inside. Beneath the transparent water, two giant wild mud crabs, each weighing nearly 1 kilogram, brandished huge blue pincers, scuttling across the sand. Further back in deeper fissures rested an ornate spiny lobster, its antennae stretching a full meter long. Its colorful shell glinted brilliantly under the water. Shang Xia's almond eyes lit up like lamps. Creatures such as these would fetch an enormous price in high-end modern seafood restaurants. Swallowing in excitement, she rolled up her sleeves and stretched her fair hand cautiously toward the crevice. But then, Shengxia bent forward. Her delicate fingertips had barely touched the cool seawater. Before she could track the two giant mud crabs, disaster struck. This frail body of the original owner was in poor physical condition. All the crouching and scrambling over rocks had drained her strength. Bending sharply downward caused blood to rush away from her brain. Her head spun violently. The colorful spiny lobster before her dissolved into overlapping blurry shapes. Her heart lurched. Low blood sugar had chosen this exact moment to strike. Instinctively, she stepped backward to steady herself. But the rocks of Devil's Reef Beach were coated in slippery sea moss. Her foot slipped. She lost her balance entirely. A short cry escaped her as she toppled backward. Directly behind her lay a deep sea trench, where swirling black eddies churned between sharp reefs. Waves crashed against stone, foaming white, threatening to swallow anything that fell in. Even if she avoided drowning, jagged rock would badly injure her. The roar of wind filled her ears, and the sharp salt tang of seawater washed over her. She squeezed her eyes shut, urgently connecting to her inner space in her mind. Prepared to risk exposing her secret, she mentally summoned an inflatable safety lifebuoy. At this critical, life-threatening instant, near the pine grove not far away, rapid, heavy footsteps crushed the dry twigs on the ground. A towering figure, built like an iron tower, came surging forward, radiating an overwhelming sense of menace. A pair of large hands cut through the cold wind, moving faster than lightning. The palms were enormous, their knuckles thick, covered in gun calluses and rough skin, looking as though cast from bronze and iron. Xingxia did not even have time to react before those powerful hands closed around her slender waist through her thin clothing, holding her fast. Thud! A pair of black high-top leather boots caked with dried mud slammed firmly into the crevices of the slippery reefs. The man's arm muscles bulged high as he halted their backward fall with brute strength. The force was so great that it sent tremors running through Xingxia's whole body. Before she could open her eyes, she was wrenched violently backward. The next instant, Xingxia was thrown unprepared straight into a hot, solid chest. Bang! Xingxia's delicate nose collided hard against his firm pectoral muscle. A dull stinging pain set in, and tears of physical discomfort welled at once in her fine almond-shaped eyes. This was hardly ordinary flesh, it felt like pressing against a heated iron plate. A scent mingling dry pine needles, alkaline soap, and the clean, earthy smell of a grown man wrapped around her completely. Shaken to her core, Xingxia huddled in his embrace, her small hands instinctively clutching the front of his green military uniform so tightly that her fingernails turned pale. At that moment, the man holding her stiffened into a motionless stone statue. Jiangji had been patrolling defense positions for military drills near this stretch of jagged reef shore. From afar, he had spotted a figure in a straw hat and spotless white canvas shoes wandering about. In this desolate spot, no one but the delicate young educated girl from the youth settlement would appear so neatly dressed. He had intended to march over and sternly send the naive city girl away. But as he drew near, he watched her stagger and tip forward, about to tumble down into the deadly swirling sea trough. His breath caught in his throat. Acting purely on instinct, he strode forward like a beast descending from the mountains, covering the distance in several long bounds. Thankfully, he had made it in time. Now, however, the soft-bodied girl was pressed tight against him. His one arm could easily encircle her narrow waist. She looked so frail that one might fear hurting her with too much pressure. A sweet, pleasant fragrance clung to her. It smelled like fresh coconut meat mixed with ripe peaches. Carried on the sea breeze, it filled his nostrils. Jiangji's large frame tensed, every muscle rigid. He drew a deep breath, trying to create space between them. Yet the girl clung to him like a frightened kitten. He looked down to see her face drained of all color, crystal tears clinging to her long eyelashes. She looked as fragile as fine porcelain. His rough palm rested lightly on her waist, and a thin layer of sweat formed on his skin. He wanted to pull his hand away, yet feared she might slip back toward the water if he let go. Comrade, educated youth. Jiangji's voice came out hoarse, low, and rumbling. He kept his expression grim, striving for a stern tone to mask his racing heartbeat. The shore is dangerous. This is no place for city folk to sightsee. You cannot even walk without stumbling. Do not cause trouble for the troops. Xingxia had recovered her wits. Hearing his gruff scolding, she privately found it rather amusing. This rough-mannered man, though his arms trembled slightly and his body burned with heat, he put on a harsh front. A glint of mischief flickered in her almond eyes. Her long lashes fluttered violently, and tears streamed down her pale cheeks. Instead of loosening her grip, she nestled deeper into his chest, her soft head brushing lightly against his shoulder. "Brother Jiangji, my legs have gone weak. I cannot walk." Her voice was soft, trembling with apparent grievance. "I was so frightened just now. I never meant to cause trouble." That gentle address stirred something deep inside him. Jiangji froze completely. A flush rose across his bronzed face, spreading down his neck to the tips of his ears. He had faced danger without flinching, yet no woman had ever spoken to him in such a tender tone. With the girl pressing close and her sweet scent surrounding him, he feared he would lose his composure. "Behave yourself," he muttered, though his words carried little authority. His large hand tightened gently around her waist. At her small gasp of surprise, he lifted her easily off the ground, holding her like a small child in his arms. Jiangji tossed the tattered yellow wicker basket securely over one broad shoulder. With his other arm supporting Xingxia, he held her firmly against him and set off toward the village with steady, long strides. Xingxia wrapped her arms around his neck, still clutching her chipped enamel mug in which coconut juice sloshed gently with every step. She tucked her face close to the collar of his military coat, leaving only her damp almond eyes visible as she peered at their surroundings. On the dirt road of Dao Brigade, villagers were returning from work and military wives were beginning supper preparations. "Look, isn't that Captain Jiang from the garrison?" Several women washing vegetables at the well rubbed their eyes, nearly dropping their sweet potatoes into the bucket. "Who is he carrying?" "Why, that is the new delicate educated youth girl. Look how pale her skin is, like porcelain. Whatever has happened here?" Curious gazes fell upon them, and whispers rippled through the crowd. Jiangji kept his stern features set, staring straight ahead as his heavy military boots thudded across the mud. His tall frame cast a long shadow in the sunset, radiating unapproachable coolness, though his neck reddened subtly in the sea wind. Hidden by Jiangji's shoulder, Xingxia sipped a little sweet coconut juice from her mug. She tilted her head and spoke softly close to his ear. "Brother Jiangji, you walk so steadily. I do not feel dizzy anymore." Jiangji stiffened again. His arm holding her tightened slightly. "Be quiet," he replied curtly. They reached the gate of the educated youth compound before entering. A shrill, piercing scream burst forth from the narrow side room to the west of the courtyard. It echoed loudly enough to send sparrows flying from the trees. Villagers gathered at the gate stared in shock. Resting against Jiangji's shoulder, Xingxia's lips curved almost imperceptibly upward. "Brother Jiangji, that sounds like my room." She tugged at his collar, her almond eyes wide with feigned alarm. Jiangji's brows knotted together. Still holding Xingxia, he strode into the compound. The door to her small room stood half open. Cries and the creak of straining wood came from inside. Jiangji reached the doorway, lifted his heavy boot, and kicked the door fully open. Bang! The door crashed against the wall, revealing the scene inside. Lin Wei was pressed awkwardly against the corner. Her right hand was stuck fast to the handle of Xingxia's desk drawer. Her left hand and part of her sleeve adhered to the wooden door panel. In her struggles, strands of her hair had gotten caught in the wood cracks. Her face twisted in pain. Her blue tunic torn open to reveal patched undergarments. She looked thoroughly disheveled. Clutched in her trapped right hand was a yellowed scrap of red cloth holding the two broken halves of the jade pendant that the brigade leader had marked as evidence earlier that day. "Lin Wei, what are you doing?" Jiangji's cold voice cut through the room. Sweating profusely, Lin Wei looked up and saw the imposing Jiangji holding the spotlessly clean Xingxia in his arms, Xingxia still holding her enamel mug and watching the scene unfold. "Xingxia, you wicked girl." Lin Wei's greed turned to rage and she shrieked. "What have you smeared on these surfaces? My hand hurts terribly. Let me go." Xingxia shrank back against Jiangji's chest, her voice trembling with apparent hurt. "Cousin, why are you in my room? Are you holding the broken jade pendant my mother left me?" Villagers and other educated youth crowded in the doorway, murmuring. "Goodness," Lin Wei broke into her cousin's room in broad daylight. "That is the jade the brigade leader said should be kept safe. She is stealing." "I am not stealing," Lin Wei shouted. "I am only taking what belongs to me. Xingxia has set a trap for me." Xingxia wiped at dry eyes and explained gently. "Cousin, Before I came down to the countryside, there were rats in the city. I bought heavy-duty rat, trapping glue tape from the supply, and marketing cooperative. I put a little on the drawer and door handle before I left, to keep rodents from chewing my mother's red hair ribbons. You would not be stuck here if you had not sneaked in to rummage through my things. Rat trapping glue was a rare commodity in these times, strong enough to hold large rats fast. Before leaving the house, Xingxia had retrieved extra, strong industrial adhesive from her private space, powerful enough to hold even heavy livestock. Lin Wei had intended to sneak inside while no one was around and steal the broken jade pieces. She believed that if she fitted them together and marked them with her own blood, she could activate a mysterious multi-story, mall-like storage space. But the moment she pulled the drawer, her right hand stuck fast. The more she struggled, the more her clothes and hair adhered to the wood, like a moth trapped in a spider's web. Jiangji glanced at the red, wrapped jade in Lin Wei's grip, then at Xingxia's innocent-looking face. A flicker of understanding crossed his dark eyes. He set Xingxia carefully down onto a clean bamboo chair and spoke in a low, firm tone. Uncle Zheng, send for the militia captain of the brigade headquarters. Breaking and entering to steal personal property belonging to a service member's family in broad daylight shall be dealt with as theft. At the words militia and theft, Lin Wei paled with terror. In this era, such accusations could mean hard labor punishment and public shaming in the county. Brigade leader, save me. I am not a thief, she wailed. Shortly afterward, Brigade Leader Zhao and several militiamen wearing red armbands burst into the room. Seeing the chaotic scene, the brigade leader's face darkened. Disgraceful. This is outrageous. He struck the door frame and shouted at Lin Wei. You were punished for hauling manure only yesterday, and now you break into someone's room to steal. You have brought shame upon our entire Dao brigade. The militiamen struggled to pry her loose, tearing skin from her palms in the process. Lin Wei nearly fainted from pain, her clothing ruined and clumps of hair torn away. Take her away. Lock her in the brigade firewood shed for public judgment tomorrow, ordered Brigade Leader Zhao. Given her poor conduct, her manure hauling punishment is extended by 2 more months, 3 months total. She must carry 10 loads every single day. 3 months. Lin Wei shuddered. Sobbing and screaming, she was dragged away by the militiamen. The courtyard quieted down. Onlookers dispersed, still chattering about the strange spectacle. Xingxia sat on the bamboo chair, rubbing her slightly reddened wrists, and let out a soft breath. Brother Jiangji, thank you for everything today. She lifted her head, her almond eyes curving gently as she looked up at him. Jiangji remained standing, his tall frame filling the small room. After a short silence, he stepped over to pick up the wicker basket they had brought back from the reef shore. Woven from tough island vines, it had been washed clean. Yet when he lifted it, the weight felt unnaturally heavy. As a soldier familiar with the shore, he knew what that implied. His dark eyes narrowed sharply as he peered inside. Beneath a covering of dry seaweed lay 2 enormous wild swimming crabs, each weighing a full kilogram, waving their spiky pincers inside the confined basket. Peeking through the gaps was also the vivid, colored shell of a rare spiny lobster. Creatures of such size dwelt only in the deepest, most dangerous reef crevices. Even seasoned fishermen could hardly catch them without proper gear. Yet here they were, fresh and lively, inside the basket belonging to a girl who supposedly stumbled easily and suffered low blood sugar spells. Jiangji froze with the basket halfway off the ground. He turned his head, his sharp, penetrating gaze fixed intently on Xingxia. She sat twisting the hem of her blouse with an innocent-looking expression. The air in the narrow room seemed to grow still. Jiangji's calloused, knuckled finger pointed toward the basket. Beneath it, the 2 large crabs snapped their pincers loudly. Xingxia's heart skipped a beat. She feared her secret might be exposed. Still, she showed no outward alarm. She widened her watery almond eyes, pressed a hand to her chest, and shrank back into the chair. Brother Jiangji, I truly only went to the shore to wash my feet. Her voice held a note of shaky relief. Somehow these 2 crabs hopped right into my basket and would not leave. Perhaps they took pity on how thin I am and wanted to give me extra food. I have always had rather good luck. Jiangji listened to this implausible story, a vein throbbing faintly on his forehead. As one of the army's best scouts, his instincts were screaming. Crabs jumping voluntarily into baskets, 2 of them, and a rare lobster as well? It was a tale too flimsy to convince a small child. Yet when he looked down, He saw her reddened wrists and her pale, timid face gazing up at him. Jiang Ji's rough Adam's apple bobbed violently. He forced the questions burning on his tongue back down his throat, taking a deep breath to suppress the stifling frustration welling up inside him, and spoke with a cold expression. Storms are frequent out at sea around this island. Every so often, large sea creatures get knocked unconscious by the waves and wash up onto the beach. He grabbed several clumps of dry seaweed beside his wicker basket and covered the green crab's top thoroughly. Don't tell anyone else about this. Otherwise, folks from the production brigade will think you're strange. Seeing Jiang Ji making excuses for her, Shangxia was secretly overjoyed. She thought to herself that this gruff man was surprisingly easy to mislead. To distract him, she quickly hugged the tattered yellow cloth bundle to her chest. She reached inside the bundle and, shielded by her spatial storage, pulled out a crudely made old clay jar marked with several cracks. Next, she took out another package tightly wrapped in yellowed coarse oil paper. Brother Jiangji, these fine grains and lard were sent to me with great difficulty by my family before I came down to the countryside. Shangxia tilted her face upward and spoke in a soft, pleading tone. Could you please put this jar somewhere high up for me? I'm too short to reach. Jiangji's gaze fell on the broken clay jar. Though worn, when its lid was lifted slightly, snow-white, fragrant lard came into view. Its quality surpassed even the finest lard available at the county supply and marketing cooperative. The oil paper package was brimming with pure white granulated sugar. In this era when even brown sugar required ration coupons, such premium goods were far beyond the reach of ordinary households. Jiangji gave Shangxia a long, thoughtful look. Without a word, he took the jar and oil paper parcel. Stretching out his long arm, he easily set the items securely on the uppermost wooden shelf beneath the roof beams. Wealth is meant to be kept hidden. Jiangxi turned toward her, his deep voice firm and unyielding. Inside the educated, youth dormitory, make sure no one sees these things, or thieves will be drawn to them. Shangxia nodded obediently, meek as a docile young woman. Watching her delicate, fragile-looking manner, a vague sense of responsibility stirred within Jiangji. This girl was full of secrets and seemed so delicate that she might break at the slightest touch. Without him looking out for her, the troublesome people on this island would surely take advantage of her. Jiangji tugged at his tight collar and strode out of the educated youth compound with a dark expression. The moment Jiangji left, Shangxia dropped her helpless act. She stretched her arms, happily picked up the jar of snow-white lard, and wandered toward the communal kitchen. It was mealtime. Quite a few people crowded around the large iron stove in the shared kitchen. The educated youths gnawed on coarse corn flatbread and thin sweet potato leaf soup that scratched at their throats as they ate. Zhang Li squatted beside the stove stoking the fire. The second she spotted Shangxia, she nearly rolled her eyes right out of her head. Ignoring her completely, Shangxia lit a fire under a spare small pot nearby. She opened the clay jar and scooped a big spoonful of pure white lard with a chipped bamboo spoon. The pot was scorching hot. When the lard hit the surface, it hissed loudly, releasing an inviting sound. Melted fat spread quickly across the bottom. Shangxia tossed in washed wild shepherd's purse and sweet potato leaves all at once. The rich, genuine aroma of rendered lard, mixed with the savory scent of crispy fat bits, spread rapidly through the entire dormitory through the chimney and cracks in the doors and windows. Several young male, educated youths chewing dark, grain-steamed buns swallowed hard, their mouths watering, eyes fixed in disbelief. Who's cooking at this hour? It smells incredible. Breathing in the scent, Zhang Li gripped her firewood stick so hard she nearly snapped it in two. Jealously burning in her eyes, she sneered sarcastically. Well, would you look at that? Have we gotten a young lady from a landlord household living among us? Everyone else is enduring hardship and receiving education, yet here you are feasting on rich food. That's exactly the sort of behavior a landlord's daughter would show. If you keep this up, you'll end up being dragged to the commune for public criticism and forced to write self-reflection essays. Shangxia ladled out a fragrant bowl of lard, tossed rice, not sparing Zhang Li even a glance. Just say you want some if that's what you're after. You can whine all you like, but the brigade captain isn't going to give you a single drop of oil. She carried her bowl and sat down on a large stone by the kitchen doorway. Nearby, a bony stray white goose covered in mud cowered behind a haystack. Its leg had been injured earlier when Zhang Li threw stones at it. Now it stared at Shangxia with intelligent, pitiful eyes. A faint smile flickered across Xingxia's eyes. Hiding her hands inside her sleeve, she pretended to pull out a dry, coarse, grain-steamed bun from her pocket. In truth, she had secretly smeared it with pure spiritual spring water from her spatial storage. Here, eat. Xingxia tossed the bun over. The white goose stretched its neck and swallowed the bun in one gulp. Something miraculous happened. After swallowing the spiritual spring water, the goose's dull eyes lit up like bright stars. Its muddied, patchy feathers turned snow, white and glossy before their very eyes, shimmering softly in the sunset light. Honk! The white goose let out a loud, resonant cry. The injury on its leg had fully healed. It jerked its neck, spread its broad wings, and marched over with bold, unapologetic strides to stand guard firmly beside Xingxia. It looked every bit like a stern, imposing bodyguard. Amused by its mighty bearing, Xingxia's almond-shaped eyes crinkled with laughter. She finished her lard-tossed rice, clapped her hands, and carried her enamel bowl toward the well to wash up. Not far away, Zhongli watched everything unfold, her teeth grinding with envy. She peeked furtively through the crack in Xingxia's window. The jar of fragrant white lard sat plainly on the wooden shelf inside. TCH, something this good shouldn't belong to a sickly girl like you. Zhongli wiped her grimy hands on her tunic. Seeing that most educated youths had returned to their rooms and only Xingxia remained by the well washing dishes, greed flashed across her face. She crouched low like a sneaky wild cat and crept slowly toward Xingxia's windowsill, reaching out her dirty hands. Dusk settled over the compound. Water splashed as Xingxia rolled up her sleeves and washed her chipped enamel bowl unhurriedly beside the well. Hiding in shadow, Zhongli kept her sharp eyes locked on Xingxia's back. Convinced Xingxia would not return anytime soon, she breathed in the lingering aroma of lard. Her mouth filled with saliva, and her stomach rumbled loudly. A sickly girl doesn't deserve food this good. I'm taking that lard jar tonight. Zhongli gritted her teeth, wiped mud from her hands on her clothing, and crept like a weasel up to the base of Xingxia's wooden-framed window. The old window latch was loose, leaving a wide gap. Through it, Zhongli clearly saw the coarse clay jar resting on the top shelf. White lard glistened invitingly in the dim room. She swallowed hard and began plotting. She would steal the lard and hide it in the backyard firewood pile. When Xingxia raised a fuss later, she would turn the accusation around, claiming Xingxia had carelessly used it all and was framing others. Pleased with her scheme, she stretched out her dirt-caked fingernails toward the cold wooden latch. Before her fingers could make contact, a large white figure slowly rose from the dim corner. It was the stray white goose, its body now noticeably larger than an ordinary domestic goose after digesting the spiritual spring water. Its plumage was brilliant white, glinting softly like polished jade in the dim light. Its formerly dull eyes shone bright, holding an air of haughty disdain. Standing by the doorway, it looked down on the crouching Zhongli like a formidable guard catching a thief. Startled by its intimidating presence, Zhongli spun around. When she saw it was only the stray goose, she hissed in a low, vicious voice. "You stupid bird! What are you staring at? I'll cook you for soup tomorrow." She waved her hands to chase it away. Instead of retreating, the goose lifted its neck high and spread its broad wings wide, casting a large shadow over Zhongli. Honk! A piercing, trumpet-like cry rang out across the backyard. Before Zhongli could react, the fierce goose charged. Its webbed feet pounded across the muddy ground. It flapped its wings and glided half a meter through the air. Its long, spring-coiled neck lunged straight for Zhongli. Its hard, reddish beak clamped down sharply. Thud! A sharp cry of pain tore through the quiet night. "Aya! Help! The goose is attacking me. It hurts." The goose showed no mercy. Pressing its advantage, it circled her, striking relentlessly. Its hard beak pecked at her over and over. It swung its heavy wings in sweeping blows, slapping hard against Zhongli's sallow face. Mud and loose goose feathers flew everywhere. Blown backward by the assault, Zhongli tripped over her own feet and landed hard in the wet backyard mud. She rolled about, screaming at the top of her lungs. Commotion drew many of the educated youths outside. Xingxia leaned casually against her room's doorframe, holding a clean enamel mug filled with warm brown sugar water brewed from supplies in her spatial storage. She sipped slowly, amusement dancing in her almond-shaped eyes as she watched Zhongli thrash in the mud, her hair matted and disheveled. She arched one eyebrow slightly. "Dubai, that's enough. Don't overdo it." Xingxia spoke softly yet firmly. "Go easy. Try not to tear Zhang Li's only work trousers. Cloth is hard to come by these days. As if understanding her words, Debai pulled back its beak. It shook its ruffled white feathers and marched regally back to Shang Xia's side, looking like a triumphant guard reporting to its employer. What is all this racket at this hour? This is outrageous. Brigade Captain Zhao stormed through the compound gate, accompanied by 2 militiamen holding flashlights. Trouble over Lin Wei's theft had only just settled earlier that day, and the brigade could ill afford more chaos. At the sight of the captain, Zhang Li scrambled over, sobbing loudly. Captain, you have to stand up for me. This crazy goose Shang Xia keeps nearly killed me. Look at my body and my face. Shang Xia must have set it on me on purpose to harm a fellow laborer. Captain Zhao shone his flashlight over Zhang Li's mud-covered face, then turned the beam to Shang Xia, who stood spotlessly clean, clutching her mug with an aggrieved expression. Zhang Li, why were you lurking under Shang Xia's window late at night instead of resting in your quarters? One sharp-eyed militiaman pointed at footprints on the ground. Captain, there are deep footprints right beneath this window. Zhang Li was trying to climb in. Captain Zhao's expression darkened. He spat angrily. Sneaking around someone's window in the dead of night. What else could you have been doing besides stealing? Shang Xia had just finished washing dishes. The goose was only protecting its owner. You got exactly what you deserved for your crooked thinking. If you keep misbehaving, you'll join Lin Wei hauling manure tomorrow. Scolded thoroughly, Zhang Li shrank back in fear at the mention of hauling manure. She dared not argue further and crouched on the ground crying quietly. After the captain and militiamen left, Lin Wei stumbled back through the compound gate. She had spent the entire day carrying pigpen manure. Even after washing 3 times with plant ash by the well, a faint unpleasant odor still clung to her clothes. Entering the yard, she spotted Zhang Li huddled in the corner weeping. Anger flared inside her. She limped over, carefully keeping her distance from Debai by Shang Xia's door, and leaned close to Zhang Li's ear, speaking in a sharp whisper. Stop crying. Think about it. Shang Xia only just arrived from the city. Where would a down-on-her-luck, educated youth get high-quality lard and fine brown sugar? Such large quantities, better than anything sold at the Supply and Marketing Cooperative. Everyone else survives on meager rations. Those fine goods must have come from somewhere improper. I bet she's sneaking into the county town black market trading restricted supplies. Tomorrow we will send an anonymous letter to the brigade office and get investigators from the County Revolutionary Committee to come. They will search her room thoroughly and have her sent to the county farm for self-criticism and public denunciation. Hearing Lin Wei's malicious scheme, a glint of greedy excitement appeared in Zhang Li's tear-streaked eyes. Before dawn broke, thick fog still hung over Seagull Island. Inside her narrow room, Shang Xia got herself ready. If she wanted to live comfortably in the educated youth dormitory, relying solely on Jiangji's stipend and ration coupons would not be enough. She needed legitimate-sounding sources for her supplies. She pulled on her plain gray patched clothing and a wide old straw hat, tucking all her black hair securely underneath. Inside her wicker basket sat 2 coarse paper parcels holding premium brown sugar and fine wheat flour, portioned out from her spatial storage the night before. Beside her, Debai shook its snow-white feathers and fixed its bright eyes on the thin hemp rope in Shang Xia's hand. Debai, I'm taking you into the county town today. You'll have to play the part of a domestic goose I'm bringing to sell. Shang Xia gently looped the rope loosely around its foot. The intelligent goose let out a soft honk and stepped willingly next to the basket. Girl and goose boarded the early morning tractor heading for the county seat. The county black market occupied an area of rundown 1-story buildings slated for demolition in the Western District. Narrow alleyways tangled amid overgrown weeds and crumbling walls, ideal for unregulated dealings. Shang Xia pulled her straw hat low over her forehead, led Debai past 2 lookouts, and slipped into the market. Damp chill hung in the early morning air of the old neighborhood, mixed with mildew. Many poorly dressed people squatted against walls whispering, bundles held in their arms. Shang Xia found a relatively clean spot beside a crumbled wall and set down her basket. She pulled some dry grass nearby. Debai stood proudly beside her, its sharp gaze scanning passers-by with more authority than a watchdog. Shang Xia sat down and peeled back one corner of the coarse paper wrapping. A rich, pure sweetness drifted out through the cold air. This brown sugar held no impurities, far superior to the sand-mixed variety most people could buy only with ration coupons. It immediately drew attention from onlookers. A middle-aged woman wearing a blue headscarf stepped forward first, sniffing the air. Her eyes lit up. Young comrade, is that brown sugar? What quality is it? What will you take in exchange? Without answering aloud, Xia pinched a tiny amount of sugar between her fair fingertips and held it out. The grains glowed rich reddish-brown in the dim light. Goodness! Even the best brown sugar from the Supply and Marketing Cooperative can't compare to this. The woman exclaimed quietly. She pulled out a stack of ration coupons. I'll give you 2 industrial coupons plus 3 grain coupons for half a gene. Xia nodded and deliberately deepened her voice. Agreed. Once the first transaction was complete, onlookers who had been watching closely crowded forward. I have 2 cloth coupons and 1 meat coupon. Give me some wheat flour. I'll trade 2 new pairs of cotton work gloves plus industrial coupons for your brown sugar. Xia moved quickly, measuring portions with remarkable accuracy. Soon most of her brown sugar and wheat flour had changed hands. Her cloth pocket bulged with a thick stack of various ration coupons. The bustling commotion did not escape the notice of several ill-intentioned onlookers. Behind a crumbling wall not far away crouched 3 shifty-looking men. The leader, a man in his 30s, bore a scar snaking across his face like a centipede. His skin looked grimy, and he twirled an unlit crude tobacco stick between his fingers. He was known as Black Blind. He was the petty boss of this cluster of bungalows, who made his living preying on other criminals without investing a cent. Brother Blind, see that new girl over there? The goods she's got are rare treasures. The lanky man beside him spat on the ground, his eyes fixed greedily on Xia Xing. And I saw her handing over the vouchers. Her hands are as pale as tofu, not a single callus on them. She's clearly a sheltered rich girl from the city. Fancy her bringing a big fat goose along too. Black Blind tucked the tobacco stick behind his ear. Greed glinted coldly in his eyes, and he let out a snort. In this territory, you can't walk away safely with such fine wares. Once she leaves the bungalow district, block her at the dead-end alley ahead. I want all her goods and that goose. The 2 henchmen grinned, rubbing their rough, dirty palms, then scattered, creeping low through the weeds. Xia Xing had just exchanged her last packet of brown sugar for a rare foreign exchange certificate. Sharp intuition sent a chill racing up her spine. She subtly scanned her surroundings and caught the greedy, hostile stares coming from behind the broken wall. Dubai, keep track of our belongings. It's time to leave. Xia Xing stuffed the empty rough paper sack into her basket, patted Dubai's rear, and tugged the rope to head out unhurriedly. Meanwhile, barely 100 meters from the black market bungalows, on the 2nd floor of the County Supply and Marketing Cooperative building, Jiangji stood by the street-facing window, dressed in plain civilian clothes. His tall frame was straight as an unsheathed spear. He had brought his men into town to track down several smuggling informants stationed locally, and also to purchase cotton shoes for the coming winter. His gaze swept slowly across the crowded, chaotic crowd below, sharp as a hawk's. Years of dangerous reconnaissance missions had honed his vigilance and instincts to an extraordinary degree. The air reeked of mixed dry tobacco, rotting vegetable leaves, and stale sweat. Then a gust of wind blew over from the rundown bungalow district across the street. Jiangji's nostrils flared faintly. He caught a unique, fresh, sweet scent. It carried hints of coconut cream mixed with ripe peach sweetness. Amid the filth and squalor of this county street, the fragrance felt pure, as if it belonged to another world. Jiangji's dark eyes widened abruptly. He would recognize this scent for the rest of his life. It belonged to that delicate girl who had slept all the way wrapped in his military overcoat, constantly complaining of aches and exhaustion. He gripped the windowsill and leaned most of his tall body out, scanning the bustling crowd below with hawk-like sharp eyes. 1 second. 2 seconds. Finally, his gaze locked onto a muddy path leading out of the bungalow compound. A petite figure clad in oversized gray clothing and a wide-worn straw hat walked forward with her head bowed. Her clothes were shabby, yet her gait was graceful and light, as if strolling through a private garden. With every step, a strip of pale, porcelain-smooth ankle peeked out beneath her short trouser hems. Trailing closely behind her was a large white goose with a small parcel strapped to its back and a tattered straw hat on its head, strutting forward with unbridled confidence. Jiangji's temples throbbed, and he could not help twitching his jaw. This bold girl. She claimed she was too weak to walk far, yet here she was, wandering the county black market, causing trouble with the goose in tow. Before the cold smirk faded from his face, icy killing intent flashed across his dark eyes. Less than 10 meters behind the small figure, 2 burly, vicious men crept forward, tailing her slowly. Both kept one hand tucked inside their coats, where bulky shapes revealed they carried weapons. The girl in the straw hat appeared completely unaware, heading straight into an overgrown, deserted dead-end alley. Jiangji's features turned grim in an instant. Without hesitation, he swung his long leg over the windowsill and jumped straight down from the second floor. He landed smoothly, kicking a pebble aside, and charged toward the alley like a hunting leopard, cold determination clinging to him. No one got away with harming her on his turf. But before he could reach the alley entrance, the quiet lane suddenly erupted in an extremely loud, resonant honk, brimming with audacious excitement. Weeds overgrew the narrow dead-end alley, and morning dew still glistened on the broken walls. Xiaosheng led Dabai into this desolate space, and three tall shadows immediately blocked the exit the moment she stepped inside. Leading them was Black Blind, the hideous centipede scar stretching across his face. He twisted his unlit tobacco stick between his fingers and looked Xiaosheng up and down with a false smile. "Little girl, this path isn't easy to travel." Black Blind glanced at her spotless white shoes, then at her bulging old backpack, greed flickering in his eyes. "Hand over your goods and come with us to our place to get out of the cold wind." The other two burly henchmen snickered, cracking their rough knuckles and advancing menacingly, sealing off the only escape route. Xiaosheng stood on the weed-choked mud ground, the brim of her straw hat pulled low. She looked at the three brutish men as if watching fools rushing headlong into a trap. "Dabai." Xiaosheng's pale hand fell to her side and gently patted Dabai's plump white rear, lowering her voice. "Go on, don't hold back. Show them the spirit of Haga Island." Dabai had long been restless. Its intelligent eyes swept over Black Blind. It tilted its neck proudly and spread snow, white wings nearly a meter wide. "Gah!" A loud, bold honk echoed through the narrow alley like a battle cry. Before Black Blind could react, Dabai pushed off the muddy ground with its webbed feet, flapped its wings hard, and glided through the air. It landed heavily right on top of Black Blind's head. Its long, powerful neck moved like a spring-loaded spear, its hard red beak striking accurately and fiercely. "Peck!" Black Blind let out an inhuman scream, clutching his cut forehead and stumbling backward. His tobacco stick fell to the ground in shock. Dabai showed no intention of stopping. Its hard beak struck repeatedly, aiming for Black Blind's sensitive eye corners, ears, and vulnerable lower body. "Peck! Peck! Peck! It hurts! Get this crazy bird off me! Pull it away!" Black Blind staggered blindly beneath Dabai's flapping wings, covered in mud and loose goose feathers, rolling wildly on the ground in agony. The smirks froze on the faces of the two other henchmen. What kind of vicious creature is this? Grab sticks and beat it down. They exchanged a glance, hastily pulling two black iron rods from their clothes and charging toward Dabai. Standing in the shadows a short distance away, Xiaosheng slowly slipped her hand into her crossbody cloth bag. Shielded by her spatial storage, she pulled out a small bottle tightly wrapped in yellowed oil paper. The wrapping looked crude, but inside sat high-grade defensive equipment from the second floor of her space pharmacy, a potent microparticle anesthetic spray. "Help! They're attacking me. Let's talk this over. Don't hurt my goose." Tears welled naturally in Xiaosheng's almond eyes. Her face paled, and she waved her small hands frantically, crying softly as if terrified out of her wits. To anyone watching, she looked utterly frightened and disoriented. Yet when the two henchmen charged to within half a meter of her, Xiaosheng pressed down gently on the nozzle with her fingertip hidden under her sleeve. A fine, colorless, odorless mist spread silently through the cool air, wrapping around both men. The drug was far stronger than any common anesthetic available in this era. Even a 200-kilogram boar would collapse within 3 seconds after inhaling it. "You noisy little girl," the tall henchman raised his iron rod, but his words died unfinished. His eyes rolled upward. Thud. A dull crash echoed as his legs buckled. He crashed face first into the mucky ground, stirring up clouds of dust. The stockier henchman stared in shock. Before he could take another breath, dizziness washed over him. He swayed like a drunkard before slumping limply to the ground. In less than 2 minutes, the three men who had come to rob her lay face down neatly in the mud, unconscious, unable even to groan. Dabai stood proudly to one side, smoothing its ruffled white feathers at a leisurely pace. It shot a dismissive sideways glance and spat out a stray blade of grass from its beak. Xiaosheng put away the spray bottle and wiped away the fake tears at the corners of her eyes. Slinging her bamboo basket over her back, She squatted down cheerfully and stretched out a slender finger to rummage through Black Blind's pockets. What you take from the world must someday be returned. Her hands moved skillfully through Black Blind's clothes. Soon, a thick stack of grain coupons, meat coupons, and several rare foreign exchange certificates were tucked safely into her cloth pouch. To stop the men from reporting her to the village committee once they woke up, Xiaoxing pulled a pencil from her basket. She scribbled large characters on a sheet of yellow rough oil paper and slipped it inside Black Blind's innermost collar. It read, "Voluntarily given as compensation to this young lady to show remorse for wrongdoing. 10 yuan. Once finished, she brushed mud off her palms, lowered her straw hat brim, and walked out of the alley with Dabai at her side. "Dabai, we've made a big profit today. You'll get extra spirit spring water tonight," Xiaoxing whispered to the goose strutting beside her. Holding her cloth pouch full of vouchers against her chest, she turned around the final bend of the alley. Before she could see the road ahead thud, her smooth, pale forehead collided squarely with a firm, warm wall of muscle. The clean soap and faint pine scent clinging to him filled her nostrils instantly. Xiaoxing stumbled back half a step, swaying. She reached to touch her sore forehead. A broad, calloused bronze palm shot out to steady her wobbling arm. A dull ache spread across Xiaoxing's forehead. She rubbed the reddened skin and lifted her head. Jiangji stood tall at the alley entrance, arms folded, straight as an unsheathed spear, looking down at her. He held his faded military cap in one hand. Beneath his neat black short hair, a pair of sharp hawk-like dark eyes stared straight at her. His fine brows creased slightly, his gaze heavy with scrutiny, as if he had witnessed every single thing she had done in the alley. Dabai stood nearby, tilted its head to glance at Jiangji, and let out a low rumble in its throat, not daring to honk loudly. Xiaoxing's heart skipped a beat. She clutched the cloth pouch of vouchers tightly in her arms. Why was this man here? How much had he seen? Had he watched Dabai peck Black Blind senseless? Or seen her knock out the other two men with the anesthetic spray? Jiangji's gaze traveled past Xiaoxing's small frame toward the depths of the alley. On the weed-covered muddy ground, 3 burly men lay motionless. Black Blind in particular bore countless red peck marks across his forehead, the scrap of handwritten oil paper sticking out of his pocket. Jiangji's Adam's apple bobbed. Confusion and curiosity deepened in his eyes as he looked back at Xiaoxing. As a long-serving reconnaissance soldier, he had seen countless scenes, yet what unfolded in this narrow alley left him stunned. This girl who constantly complained she lacked strength to walk had single-handedly subdued 3 thugs within minutes, aided only by a goose. Xiaoxing's mind raced. Her almond eyes grew watery. Plop. Her body went limp, and she settled neatly onto a pile of dry grass. Brother Jiangji, she pressed her pale hands against her sore ankle. Tears quickly pooled in her eyes. Woo, it was terrifying. Those bad men wanted to steal my basket and hurt my goose. Dabai cooperated instantly. It lowered its head and nudged her knee gently with its beak, letting out a pitiful whimper. Xiaoxing sniffled softly. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks, her voice thin and shaky with sobs. Dabai fought desperately to protect me. I was so scared. My white shoes are all dirty now. These shoes rub my feet raw, I have blisters. I can't stand up, woohoo. She trembled as she cried, her small shoulders huddled inside the oversized gray tunic, looking as vulnerable as a lost kitten caught in a storm. Jiangji watched her tear-streaked, pale face. His temples throbbed repeatedly. He had seen clearly from the second floor of the supply and marketing cooperative. When facing the 2 henchmen, she had remained as calm as if strolling in a private garden. While outsiders might believe her frantic waving came from terror, he had spotted her subtle finger movements and seen the fine mist drift outward. Within 3 seconds, the 2 large men crashed to the mud. After knocking them unconscious, she had squatted down cheerfully to search Black Blind's pockets, moving with the ease of someone who had done this many times. Now, in the blink of an eye, she had transformed back into a fragile porcelain doll who could barely withstand a knock. Jiangji sighed silently to himself. Her acting was clumsy, almost mocking his finely honed reconnaissance instincts. Yet when he glanced down, he saw the raw red abrasions on her small pale feet from the stiff new shoes. The marks stood out sharply against her fair skin, a sight that tugged at his heart. His hard expression softened with helplessness. This girl he cared about was full of inexplicable secrets and far too delicate. There was nothing he could do. She was the girl he had set his heart on. If he did not stand guard beside her, sooner or later she would expose herself to others. Stop crying. Jiangji's deep voice echoed in the quiet alley. His tone remained gruff, stripped of the usual sharp military sternness. He knelt without a word, stretched out his broad calloused hand, and lifted the heavy bamboo basket off Xiaosheng's back. Powerful arm muscles tensed as he slung the basket securely across his chest. Then he turned, bending his tall frame over on the patch of damp dry grass, presenting his broad back to Xiaosheng. Climb up. His low, rough voice carried unmistakable resolve. Xiaosheng's crying paused. Glistening tears still clung to her eyelashes as she stared at the wide, solid expanse of his back. Brother Jiangji, I'm quite heavy, she sniffled and mumbled shyly. Jiangji let out a huff, turning his head slightly to reveal his rugged side profile, his tone stiff. Hurry. The village tractor will leave soon. Xiaosheng pressed her lips together. A sly glint flickered in her eyes. She secured her enamel mug and cloth pouch, leaned forward and settled gently onto his back. The moment her weight rested against him, Jiangji stiffened all over, his body taut as forged iron, his breathing growing heavier. That unique sweet fragrance, mixing coconut and ripe peach, wrapped around him completely. He clenched his rough hands at his sides, drew a deep breath, then steadied her with his arms supporting her legs. Let's go. Jiangji strode forward steadily, along the muddy road leading back to the village. Dabai, wearing its small straw hat, marched proudly beside them with its head held high, acting like a vigilant guardian. Wind drifted through the woods on the outskirts of the county, rustling the leaves. Jiangji carried her smoothly, and Xiaosheng barely felt any jolting movement. She lay against his warm back, breathing in his clean soap and pine scent. A strong sense of safety filled her heart. Brother Jiangji, you're so kind. Xiaosheng tilted her head, her sweet voice reaching his ear, warm breath brushing the base of his neck. The tips of Jiangji's ears flushed red. He shifted uncomfortably and lowered his voice. You are not to travel to the county alone from now on. Warning laced his gruff tone. Keep the unusual brown sugar and wheat flour you've got in that bag and the carrying basket hidden. Don't let anyone see them. He paused, his deep black gaze fixed firmly on the muddy road ahead, his tone far more serious than it had ever been. Do you understand? Xingxia lay on his back, and a smile tugged at her beautiful lips when she heard the question. This gruff man had a stern exterior but a warm heart. He knew she harbored secrets, yet instead of questioning her or reporting her, he was actively helping her cover everything up. MHM, I understand. I'll listen to Brother Jiangji. Xingxia replied softly and sweetly, her small hands clinging gently around his neck. The glow of the setting sun stretched their shadows long across the ground. But the moment Jiangji carried Xingxia to the gate of the educated youth compound, before Xingxia could climb down from his back, a sharp, triumphant laugh cut through the air from the doorway. Well now, Comrade Xing. You went into town for the day, and now you can't even walk on your own feet? You have to let the soldier carry you. Zhang Li stood with her hands planted firmly on her hips beside the threshold, her shifty little eyes brimming with malicious glee. Beside her stood Clerk Zhao from Haya Island Production Brigade, clutching a yellowed notebook in his hand. Zhang Li pointed at Xingxia and shouted loudly so everyone could hear. Xingxia, you skipped work without permission to go to the county seat today. Your ideological awareness is appalling. Clerk Zhao has already noted it down. Starting tomorrow, you'll be sent to dig sandworms in the treacherous muddy flats. If you don't work 3 full days, the brigade office won't assign you any work points. You'll starve, you spoiled petty, bourgeois young lady. Zhang Li stood beneath the old locust tree in the educated youth compound courtyard, hands still on her hips, undisguised triumph shining in her narrow eyes. Beside her, Lin Wei had just set down her manure bucket out back. The faint sour stench still clung to her clothes as she hurried over. Lin Wei wiped sweat from her face with her muddy sleeve, her eyes glowering toward Xingxia's room. She lowered her voice and spoke to Clerk Zhao. Clerk Zhao, everyone saw that Xingxia skipped work yesterday. If those who break the rules aren't punished severely, how can we maintain discipline in the brigade? Clerk Zhao twisted the faded red plastic clipboard in his grasp, looking hesitant. Seeing this, Zhang Li raised her voice, determined to make sure Xingxia inside the house heard every word. Exactly. No one likes working the muddy tidal flats out back, and we're short-handed for sandworm digging today. Xingxia's ideological outlook needs improvement. She ought to work in the harshest conditions to receive education, and toughen herself up by digging sandworms. That stretch of tidal flat was known across Haya Island as a fetid bog. The black mud reached knee-deep. It reeked terribly, and sharp broken shells lay hidden within the muck, ready to slice calves open at the slightest misstep. Zhongli and Lin Wei pictured Shengxiao's fair, delicate legs sinking into the sticky, stinking black mud, certain her skin would be torn raw. They exchanged a glance, unable to hold back their sneers. Creak, the tightly closed wooden door slowly creaked open. Shengxia stepped out clutching a patched white cloth handkerchief, her eyes glistening red. She swayed slightly with every step, like peach blossoms on the verge of falling in the wind. When she reached Clerk Zhao, she pressed the handkerchief to her mouth and let out a string of weak coughs before she could speak. Her naturally pale cheeks flushed with an unhealthy tint from the coughing fit. Clerk Zhao, I truly cannot go to that tidal flat. Shengxiao's voice was soft and thin, thick with grievance and the threat of tears. I've suffered from a chronic illness since I was little. Cold wind leaves me tight, chested and gasping for breath. I also have low blood sugar. My vision blurs to blackness if I stand too long. The mud there rises above the knees. If I get stuck and cannot pull free, I fear I will not make it through the day. As she spoke, she glanced timidly at Zhongli and Lin Wei through blurred almond eyes. Cousin, I know you and comrade Zhongli have the brigade's best interests at heart, but you cannot send me to face such mortal danger. Shengxia dabbed at her eyes with trembling hands. Her frail, pitiful appearance stirred sympathy among the other educated youths watching nearby. Clerk Zhao stared at her wobbly frame and grew uneasy. If this delicate girl really came to harm out on the mudflats, he would lose his position as clerk. Enough, comrade Shengxia. Clerk Zhao sighed and scrawled a heavy cross in his notebook. Since your health won't permit it, you're excused from digging sandworms on the tidal flats. Still, the brigade does not support idle hands. If you do no work today, you will earn 0 work points and the brigade office will allocate no grain rations to you. Disappointment washed over Zhongli and Lin Wei, quickly replaced by triumphant joy. In these times, when food depended entirely on work points and grain coupons, no work points meant slow starvation. No work means no food. Let's see how long that young lady's delicate frame can hold out. Zhongli spat scornfully, hoisted her carrying pole, and trundled off with the fowl, smelling Lin Wei to join the rest of the villagers. The gate of the educated youth compound shut behind them. Shengxia lowered her handkerchief, and the look of critical frailty vanished from her face in an instant. She brushed imaginary dust from her clothes slowly, her fine brows lifting slightly. Starve me? How imaginative of them. Shengxia slung her small carrying basket over her shoulder and stuffed 2 hard black flour buns inside for appearances. Then she shot a glance at the white goose standing guard by the gate. Bida, come. Let's head out for a little getaway. The white goose wore a straw hat given to it by a villager. It tilted its neck proudly and strode alongside Shengxia with unrivaled confidence. Girl and goose wandered leisurely through the village toward the remote, desolate rocky shore on the edge of High Island. Jagged boulders littered the stretch of coast, pounded year-round by rough waves. Even seabirds avoided landing here. Villagers avoided the difficult terrain and almost never ventured this far. But for Shengxia, this place was a natural retreat. She picked out a large flat boulder sheltered from direct sunlight and sprinkled realgar powder around it to ward off sea snakes. Settling comfortably on the rock, she reached into her tattered cloth bag and tapped her spatial shopping mall with her mind. A second later, a waterproof, UV-shielded foldable mat materialized on the ground. Its texture resembled cool silk, wonderfully comfortable to lie upon. Shengxia stretched out atop it and pulled a large enamel mug of chilled coconut juice from the cold storage cabinet inside her space. She took a long sip. Sweet, icy coconut juice slid down her throat, making her squint her almond eyes in bliss. Sea breezes tangled through her black hair and blue skies stretched overhead. A short distance away, Bida stood like a valiant guard, chest puffed out, patrolling dutifully. Shengxia dangled her pale bare feet, utterly content. Zhongli and Lin Wei were most likely wallowing in the stinking black mudflats right now, covered head to toe in muck. They would strain their backs for a handful of work points. Meanwhile, she sat here sipping cold drinks and soaking up the sunshine. This was what living ought to be. Once she had enjoyed herself enough, she rolled onto her stomach on the mat. Her pale hand slipped back into the cloth bag and pulled out a small gray box. Deep sea sonar locator. Shengxia pressed the power button. The screen lit up instantly, glowing faint pale green, scanning lines rotating slowly across its surface. Though this rocky shore was desolate, the waters beneath teemed with life. Dense pale red dots quickly dotted the display. Xingxia sipped her cold coconut juice and watched the screen happily. Suddenly, the bottom, right corner of the sonar screen flickered violently twice. In shallow waters, near the edge of the coastal pine forest behind her, a new dot appeared. Unlike the pale red marks marking ordinary sea creatures, this dot blazed a striking, alarming shade of purple. Xingxia lay on the cool silk mat, her pale fingertip tapping the sonar locator. The purple warning dot remained fixed at the edge of the pine forest behind her. She mentally searched the database within her spatial mall. Red cap, no spots, faint yellow at the base, deep crimson sap. It's premium blood mushrooms. A smile curved Xingxia's almond eyes, excitement bubbling up inside her. These were no ordinary wild mushrooms, rare, high-grade medicinal fungi. In this era short of doctors and medicine, black markets and state-run pharmacies in the county competed fiercely to buy prime blood mushrooms. An ounce could be traded for plentiful meat coupons and scarce foreign exchange certificates. Beyond the wild fungi in the pine woods, the bottom of the sonar screen was crowded with large bright red signals. Glancing down at the rock pools left behind by the receding tide, she spotted enormous sea snails tucked within the crevices, quietly bubbling away. Each one was as big as a wash basin. Xingxia wiggled her bare toes and took another big gulp of chilled coconut juice. On such a hot day, bending over to dig snails out of rock crevices or trekking through the woods amid insects to gather mushrooms clashed with every principle of comfort she upheld as an heir to a wealthy conglomerate. Xingxia brushed sand off her hands and slowly pulled out a handful of spiced sunflower seeds. "Baida, over here." She waved to the white goose patrolling proudly nearby. Baida strode over with its usual imposing gait, waddling up to the silk mat. It tilted its straw-hatted head, its round eyes glinting with intelligence. Xingxia spat out a seed shell and pointed toward the coastal pine forest behind her with a pale finger. "Baida, see that pine grove? Beneath the old pine trees grow bright red little mushrooms. Go fetch them one by one. Don't bite them and don't eat any." Baida flapped its wings unenthusiastically, letting out low rumbling noises from its throat, clearly reluctant to move. Xingxia was unperturbed. She lowered her voice slightly, speaking with tempting warmth. "If you do well, tonight I'll give you a full bowl of pure spirit spring water, no seawater mixed in." At the words spirit spring water, Baida's eyes lit up like two searchlights. It stretched its long neck straight and flapped its broad white wings vigorously. "Honk!" The cry rang out loud and clear, brimming with eagerness. Without a moment's hesitation, Baida turned and raced across the sand, vanishing into the pine forest in the blink of an eye. Xingxia watched its hurried retreat and smiled, her almond eyes crinkling into crescents. She leaned back comfortably beneath her sunshade and continued munching fragrant spiced sunflower seeds. Less than 5 minutes passed before Baida's triumphant honks echoed out of the woods. The plump white goose carefully clamped a perfectly intact red mushroom in its broad beak. The mushroom's cap was unbroken, dotted with glistening dew, shining with the distinct deep crimson hue of premium blood mushrooms in the sunlight. Baida trotted over and gently set the blood mushroom into the small bamboo basket beside Xingxia. "Good boy. You'll be richly rewarded later." Xingxia smiled and stroked its warm head. Encouraged by the praise, Baida's enthusiasm surged. It spun around and darted back into the trees, working like a relentless mushroom harvester. In no time, more than a dozen top-quality wild blood mushrooms sat neatly stacked in the bamboo basket. Once the mushrooms were gathered, Baida's gaze shifted toward the rock pool snails. No command from Xingxia was needed. The clever goose flapped its wings and glided half a meter down to the deep rock pool. Its hard reddish beak struck sharply and precisely at the giant snails hidden deep in the stone cracks. Click, click. Baida's long neck struck like a coiled spear, twisting to pry loose the wash basin-sized sea snail tucked furthest inside. It clamped the snail in its beak, flapped its wings, and trotted back proudly to deliver its catch. In less than half an hour, Xixia's bamboo basket was full. At the bottom rested 5 or 6 heavy, bubbling giant sea snails, topped with premium blood mushrooms covered loosely with dry yellow grass. If the villagers and educated youth slaving away every day caught sight of this, they would be overcome with envy. Xingxia sat up and gently examined Baida's slightly worn webbed feet. "You've worked hard, my great steward. As she spoke, she peeled a plump sunflower seed kernel and held it out to the goose. Baida tilted its head up haughtily and swallowed the kernel, letting out a satisfied rumble. Xingxia was peeling another kernel to offer when Baida, who had been waiting expectantly beside her, suddenly fluffed out all its white feathers. Its long neck stiffened, wings spreading slightly in alertness. Baida's sharp eyes locked onto the tangled rocky thicket behind them. Hiss, a low, warning rasp escaped its beak. Xingxia paused, her almond eyes narrowing. Scuffle, rustle. Heavy footsteps and the crack of broken branches drifted out from behind a coconut palm nearby. 3 rough, unkempt men wearing dirty short tunics stepped slowly out of the pine forest shadows. The lead man had a broad, brutish face. When his shifty eyes landed on Xingxia's delicate, fair features, undisguised greed flickered across his face. This was Li Ergu, a notorious loafer from the brigade. His aunt, the sharp-tongued Antli, carried influence in the village, letting Li Ergu bully others freely on High Island. "Ergaga, look at what's in that basket." The scrawny sidekick beside him spotted the contents of Xingxia's bamboo basket and swallowed hard. The glossy, deep crimson premium blood mushrooms, plus the giant sea snails bubbling beneath them, caught the eye instantly. Li Ergu's eyes widened with greed. Wild blood mushrooms were highly sought after goods on the county black market. A basket like this could be traded for countless meat coupons and cigarettes. "Girl, it's lonely out here all by yourself. Hand over your goods and keep us company for a while." Li Ergu grinned crudely, rubbing his grimy hands as he advanced toward her with his 2 companions. Hidden behind a remote coconut tree not far away was another sneaky figure. He wore a faded white button-up shirt, a fountain pen tucked into his pocket, clutching a book of poetry tightly in his hand. It was Comrade Song, the self-proclaimed most talented educated youth at the compound. Comrade Song had secretly kept an eye on Xingxia for a long time. He was drawn not only to her pretty face. He also coveted the substantial fortune her grandfather, a returned overseas professor, supposedly owned in the city. If he could win her heart when she was vulnerable, his life after returning to the city would be secure. He had followed her quietly all the way here, waiting for her to encounter trouble so he could stage a heroic rescue and win her affection. Now Li Ergu and his gang had appeared, exactly as he hoped. Comrade Song smoothed his greasy side part, certain his moment had arrived. "Stop this at once." Just as Li Ergu advanced to grab Xingxia, Comrade Song leaped out from behind the coconut tree. He held his head high, striking what he believed to be an elegant, brave pose. In broad daylight, "How dare you harass Comrade Xingxia?" One hand planted on his hip, the other pointing at Li Ergu, he shouted with righteous indignation. "Don't be afraid, Sister Xingxia. I'm here to protect you. No one will harm a single hair on your head." After shouting, he shot Xingxia what he thought was a warm, unforgettable tender gaze. Xingxia sat on the UV protective mat, staring at the 2 unexpected arrivals, her head throbbing. She sighed silently, and Baida rolled its distinctive deadpan eyes beside her. Li Ergu glanced at Comrade Song's thin, weak frame and could not even be bothered to sneer. Where did this nuisance come from? "Don't get in our way." Before Comrade Song could settle into his next dramatic pose, Li Ergu raised his large palm. Smack! The sharp crack of the slap echoed across the empty rocky shore. Comrade Song spun halfway around on the spot, like a top struck hard. He landed face down with a heavy thud on the soft, damp sand. His black, rimmed glasses flew far away, and a mouthful of salty, muddy silt filled his mouth. "TCH, hardly any meat on your bones, yet you're out here trying to act tough." Li Ergu spat, rubbed his wrist and grinned, stepping slowly toward Xingxia. His muddy, grimy hand, reeking of sour rot, stretched straight out toward Xingxia's delicate shoulder. Xingxia sat on the mat, her fair face showing just the right trace of alarm. Yet, at an angle no one could see, the corners of her fine lips tugged upward slightly. Using her mind, she quietly connected to the inter-dimensional shopping mall, targeting a small, jagged reef covered in sharp thorns. Li Ergu's foul, smelling hand was only an inch away from Xingxia's shoulder. She could even smell the briny stench trapped beneath his fingernails. She subtly shrank back half an inch, her consciousness linked to the rubble inside her space. Before she could summon the spiky, sharp reef, the straw-hatted white goose that had been standing guard nearby with listless eyes suddenly fluffed out all its snow-white feathers. Honk! A shrill, piercing cry erupted across the empty reef shore, loud as an air raid siren. Before Li Ergu's fingertips could brush a single strand of Shangxia's hair, the goose's sturdy webbed feet pounded across the sand, kicking up trails of silt. Its snow-white wings, spanning nearly a meter when spread, churned the air with a whoosh. Like two large iron fans, they struck Li Ergu's fleshy face repeatedly. Slap, 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 slap. The sharp sounds echoed across the beach without pause. Blown off balance by the wings, Li Ergu spun in place like a top, seeing stars. Where did this damned bird come from? I'll kill you. Clutching his stinging face, Li Ergu roared furiously and swung his fist at the goose. But the goose moved nimbly like a streak of white lightning, hopping easily out of the fist's path. Its long, powerful neck retracted, then shot forward like a spring-loaded steel javelin. It aimed precisely and viciously for Li Ergu's lower body and pecked hard. Peck. Li Ergu let out a shrill, agonizing scream. He doubled over like a shrimp, hands clamped tightly over his torso. His face twisted in pain, and he dropped to his knees on the shell-strewn rocky shore, eyes rolling. The two scrawny underlings stared in shock and quickly picked up wooden sticks to rush forward and help. The white goose tilted its head proudly, flapped its wings, and leaped half a meter into the air. Its hard red beak blurred as it struck repeatedly at the two men's eye sockets and noses. Peck, 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 peck. It hurts. What kind of monster is this? Stop pecking. My face is ruined. In the blink of an eye, the three bullies who had been swaggering moments earlier were rolling on the rocky shore. They clutched their wounds, screaming at the top of their lungs. The white goose stood proudly atop a tall reef, slowly preening its immaculate white plumage with its crimson beak. Its dull eyes held open contempt, as if watching three insignificant fools. Shangxia leaned against a large reef behind her, holding an enamel mug and sipping sweet, cool coconut juice little by little. She tilted her head and watched Li Ergu wailing in the silt, a soft smile tugging at her pretty lips. A short distance away on the gravel, the young man Song, who had been stunned by Li Ergu's slap, finally regained his senses. He pushed himself up from the sand, spat out mouthfuls of grit mixed with blood, his crooked black, rimmed glasses hanging askew from one ear. He glanced at Li Ergu and his companions rolling on the ground, then turned to Shangxia standing unblemished beside the reef. He believed his chance as a scholar had finally arrived. Even though he had taken a blow earlier, if he stepped forward now to protect this sheltered granddaughter of a wealthy family, Shangxia would surely grow fond of him. Song quickly smoothed his greasy side, swept hair caked with sand. He puffed out his chest and strode toward Shangxia with a limp, putting on a gentle, brave expression. Shangxia, don't be afraid. Ergu and the others have been subdued by this heroic goose. He spread his arms, his tone warm and earnest. I'm here. No one can hurt you. Let me walk you back to the educated youth quarters. Seeing Song rushing toward her, Shangxia felt a wave of revulsion rise in her throat, nearly bringing up the coconut juice she had just drunk. Her beautiful almond eyes narrowed slightly, cold disdain flickering deep within them. When Song was only 3 steps away, the fair fingertips hidden beneath her sleeve moved gently. Her mind swept across the storage section of the inter-dimensional shopping mall. A fist-sized chunk of rock lined with sharp jagged edges and slippery moss materialized out of nowhere right on the sand where Song was about to step. Song's gaze was fixed intently on Shangxia's delicate face, and he failed to notice the rubble underfoot. Crack. His right foot landed squarely on the slippery sharp stone. His footing slipped, and sharp pain shot up his foot. He let out a sharp cry, losing his balance completely. Carried forward by momentum, he flew more than 3 meters in a perfect flat forward fall. Directly in his path sat a half-dug pit of incompletely fermented manure, left by elderly fishermen to fertilize their crops. The pit was filled with thick, dark sludge, bubbling green under the sun. A strong, acrid stench hung heavy in the air. Splash! A heavy, resounding crash echoed across the beach. Song plunged face first into the manure pit in an extremely awkward posture. Thick black filth splattered everywhere. Gurgle, gurgle. Bubbles rose from deep within the pit. Thrashing his thin arms, Song barely lifted his muddy face above the muck. Filth coated his mouth, nose, and glasses. Ugh, bleh. He retched violently, clinging to the pit's edge, tears streaming from the pain and disgust. His white shirt was soaked black, and a repulsive odor clung to him. Shangxia pinched her nose and stepped several paces backward, watching him flail and shriek. The white goose rolled its eyes and held its head high with pride. Li Ergu and the other two bullies forgot their pain for the moment. They stared at Song struggling in the pit, then at the imposing, fierce white goose, trembling all over. Spare us, honored goose. Kneeling on the sand, Li Ergu kowtowed repeatedly, his voice shaking. We won't cause trouble again. We don't want the goods. We'll leave at once. As the three men begged and Song continued retching in the manure pit, heavy, rhythmic bootsteps sounded along the coconut grove path leading to the sentry post. The footsteps were orderly, carrying unmistakable authority. Soon, a patrol team emerged around the bend. They wore faded but spotless green military uniforms and stood straight as they marched. Towering above the rest, the man leading the group stood nearly 190 centimeters tall, his broad frame blocking much of the overhead sunlight. Jiangji rested one hand on the leather belt around his waist. Beneath his neat short black hair, his sharp, hawk-like eyes swept over the chaotic, absurd scene on the shore. His rugged, stern face darkened instantly. Heavy military boots crushed loose gravel, thudding against the damp sea wind. Jiangji strode ahead. His tall, sturdy frame wrapped in a crisp uniform radiated overwhelming pressure with every step. Behind him, several soldiers carrying wooden rifles stood upright, yet their eyes widened as they took in the sight by the reefs. Li Ergu and his two companions lay piled on the sand, clutching their wounds and whimpering. Beside them, Song hung halfway out of the manure pit, his face and hair covered in dark sludge. Muck clouded his vision, yet his gaze remained fixed firmly on clean, unsoiled Shangxia beside the reef, and he mumbled indistinctly, "Shangxia, don't be afraid, I'll protect you." That unsettling stare made Shangxia frown faintly. It also sent a surge of anger surging through Jiangji as he walked down the path. Trained by years of combat, his instincts triggered an immediate protective alert. He had traveled here worried sick, fearing the young woman would suffer harm. Yet this foul-smelling, helpless man dared to look at her like that? Jiangji's stern face turned stormy. Ignoring the kneeling Li Ergu and his companions, he strode toward the manure pit. Stomp. His heavy leather boots slammed down on the pit's edge. A shower of mud splattered forward, hitting Song square in the face and cutting off his rambling. Song slipped deeper into the muck, coughing violently, unable to utter another word. Li Ergu and his friends shook violently, pressing their faces into the sand, afraid to breathe too loudly. Captain Jiang, we didn't do anything, Li Ergu stammered, nodding toward the white goose wandering nearby. It's this crazy goose. It attacked us. We're the victims. The soldiers behind Jiangji exchanged glances, looking at the straw-hatted goose walking confidently, and fought to keep their expressions neutral. Could a goose beat 3 grown men? No one would believe it. Jiangji rested his hands on his belt, staring down at the men without sparing them much attention. He turned his head, his voice cold and hard as ice, as he instructed his soldiers. This remote reef zone falls within the military exercise restricted area under the brigade's defense. These people sneaked in suspiciously. They are suspected of endangering defense security. Comrade Shangxia remains here to assist with military supply investigations. Everyone else will be detained on suspicion and taken to the brigade headquarters for questioning. In this era, accusations related to security suspicion carried severe consequences. Hearing this, Li Ergu and his companions paled, slumping on the sand. Too terrified to plead further. Captain Jiang. We aren't security threats, we just take them away. Jiangji cut off his cries with a sharp wave of his hand. Soldiers stepped forward, binding Li Ergu and his companions tightly with coarse yellow rope. They dragged the stinking Song out of the manure pit as well, and marched the whole group toward the brigade headquarters. Moments later, the chaotic beach fell quiet. Only the wind whistled, crashing waves against the dark reefs, foaming white. The white goose walked over to the woven basket, held its head high proudly, then wandered a short distance away to keep watch. Shangxia leaned against the cool reef wall with her enamel mug, blinking her clear almond eyes innocently. Before she could speak to the stern man, Jiangji's tall figure moved silently toward her. His dusty military boots stopped half a step in front of her spotless white shoes. His broad frame cast a heavy shadow, blocking most of the sunlight and sea breeze. Shangxia's vision dimmed. A strong scent of pine mixed with his distinct masculine presence washed over her. The pressure made her instinctively step back, but the hard, cold reef wall blocked any retreat. She pressed herself against the stone, shrinking inward, looking small and vulnerable. Jiangji lowered his gaze, his hawkish eyes locked steadily on her. His line of sight traveled slowly from her clean white shoes on the sand, upward to the woven basket brimming with top-grade dark red mushrooms with large sea conchs tucked underneath. Finally, his eyes settled on her soft, fair face flushed lightly. The sea wind was wild here. Anyone gathering seafood came back windburnt, covered in salty silt. Only this young woman smelled sweet, not a speck of dirt on her clothes. She had even found a way to enjoy cold coconut juice here. Jiangji clenched and unclenched his calloused hands at his sides. He knew she held countless, unexplainable secrets. He suspected she had caused Song to slip and fall into the manure pit. Yet when he met her innocent, wary eyes, the anger burning inside him over other men's attention toward her flared hotter still. The sweet aroma of ripe peach and coconut milk drifted between them. Jiangji's Adam's apple bobbed repeatedly, his blood running hot. He leaned forward, shielding her entirely under his frame. Shangxia. His deep, rough voice sounded hoarse against the sea wind, mixed with heavy, restrained breathing. His long, knuckled hand covered in weapon calluses lifted slowly. His movements were stiff, yet his fingertips touched her delicate chin gently and carefully. The rough texture of his calluses against her skin sent a faint warm tingle through her. Shangxia trembled, pressing her lips together nervously. Your secrets, all those unexplainable things. Jiangji stared deep into her eyes. His grip was light, yet firm with quiet resolve. I will keep them hidden for you. I will guard them for the rest of my life. No one will uncover a single trace of your secrets. He lowered his head, warm breath falling against the tip of her reddened ear. His voice dropped to a low rumble, sharp with possessiveness. But you have to remember this. Do not smile at other men. Do not even glance at them. Do you understand? Shangxia flushed beneath his warm breath. The gentle brush of his fingertips on her chin made the tips of her ears burn. This stern, reserved man became fiercely possessive once his jealousy stirred. She bit her lower lip shyly, her long eyelashes trembling rapidly. She was about to bat her watery almond eyes and speak softly to coax him. Before her gentle voice could escape, Jiangji drew a deep breath, as if settling on a major decision. He reached quickly into his pocket and pulled out a thick stack of documents wrapped tightly in craft paper and cloth. Then the man grabbed Shangxia's fair, delicate hand somewhat roughly, yet with immense tenderness. He pressed a stack of official transfer orders, warmed by his body heat and stamped with the bright red seal of the South Naval Military Region, straight into her palm. Jiangji stared at her, his gaze burning like a flame capable of melting everything, his voice deep and resonant. Xia, my quota for military-dependent residency will be submitted soon. Come with me. Will you? The thick morning fog over Seagull Island had only just lifted, and the public well near the brigade headquarters was already bustling with activity. Wooden buckets clanged against the stone well rim, sending cold well water splashing everywhere. Antley wore a grayed coarse cloth apron, scrubbing a tattered pair of trousers vigorously in a wooden basin. Her hands were covered in white soap suds, yet her tongue moved faster than her hands. Let me tell you all, that new educated youth Shangxia has a terrible reputation. Antley lowered her voice, her wrinkled triangular eyes darting warily around her. She edged closer to several military wives washing vegetables beside her. I saw it with my own eyes. She sneaks into the pine grove every day, exchanging intimate gestures with Captain Jiang from the garrison. A young lady who refuses to work and only seeks the company of men. Her name is already ruined. A woman holding a wooden basin smacked her lips, leaning forward hesitantly. Is it really that serious? Captain Jiang is always cold and disciplined. Would he take a fancy to such a delicate girl who tires easily? Even stern men are still men. Antley spat on the ground, her face twisted with disdain and malice. I heard she already had a bad name back in the city. That's why her family secretly signed her up to be sent down to the countryside. She keeps running off to isolated places. Before long, Shangxia will tarnish the reputation of everyone on Seagull Island. As she spoke, she scrubbed harder, slapping the water in the basin until it splashed loudly. She intended to destroy Shangxia's good name in front of the entire brigade. Only then could her schemes unfold smoothly when the moment came. Meanwhile, inside the low, damp female dormitory of the educated youth quarters, chill lingered in the morning air. Zhengli sat on the edge of the wide shared bed, combing her dry yellow hair slowly with a broken wooden comb. Have you heard the gossip outside? Zhang Li turned her head, looking at the other female, educated youths with undisguised glee. Word has spread by the public well that Shangxia has improper conduct and wanders into the woods every day. The brigade's record keeper already holds a grudge against her. In a few days, she might be summoned to the main compound, forced to wear a tall paper hat and have half her head shaved for public humiliation. Another girl who usually kept close company with Zhang Li sneered. It serves her right. She acts like a wealthy landlord's daughter, complaining about mud whenever she works. If her head gets shaved, we'll see how she continues to draw people's attention among the educated youths. Several young women consumed by envy of Shangxia's beauty huddled together, whispering and laughing, their voices dripping with vicious malice. At the far end of the room, a tattered blue floral cloth curtain was drawn tightly across a bed. Faint, muffled sobs drifted out from behind it, painting a pitiful picture. Zhang Li rolled her eyes and raised her voice. Shangxia, don't cry inside the dormitory. You're bringing bad luck to everyone else. If you have any dignity, head to the brigade headquarters tomorrow and confess all your misdeeds to the brigade leader. Behind the closed curtain, however, Shangxia leaned comfortably against her soft quilt, not shedding a single tear. Moments earlier, she had dabbed water on the corners of her eyes to create the illusion of swollen tear ducts. Right now, she busied herself mentally with the vast shopping space inside her mind. Wrapped in soft white fine cotton cloth were plump, glossy crimson strawberries, fresh and pesticide-free. These rare fruits had just been fetched from the premium fruit counter on the second floor of her spatial mall. In an era where many struggled even to fill their bellies with dried sweet potatoes, bringing these strawberries out would make every villager burn with envy. Shangxia gently picked one and popped it into her mouth. When she bit down, rich, sweet, tart juice burst across her tongue. Sweet all the way down her throat. She squinted her almond eyes contentedly, eating slowly while listening to Zhang Li and the others' taunts. They hoped to crush her with public opinion? They had picked the wrong opponent. She waited to see whether these troublesome people could still laugh so triumphantly once the drama truly unfolded. As the sun dipped westward, beneath the large locust tree at the village entrance, Li Ergo wore an oily singlet, chewing on a weed stalk and drooling as he listened to his mother's mutterings. Mother, can Shangxia really become my wife tomorrow? The thought of Shangxia's fair, supple face made Li Ergu's head spin, saliva dripping uncontrollably from his mouth. Of course she will. Li waved a large palm leaf fan and patted Li Ergu's shoulder proudly. Her reputation is already ruined by the well. Soon, no one in the whole brigade will dare look her in the eye. Captain Jiang only just earned his officer rank. He will never risk his promising future for a woman with a tainted reputation. Once everyone shuns her, I'll bring betrothal gifts tomorrow to propose. She won't have a choice but to marry you. A greedy cold glint flashed across Aunt Li's eyes as she lowered her voice. Marry her and all the property left by her maternal grandfather, a university professor in the city, will belong to our Li family. We'll own a big house, a bicycle, anything you want. Li Erga grinned widely, showing all his teeth, and nodded repeatedly. Got it, mother. I'll come with you tomorrow. We'll make sure this marriage happens. Night fell deeper. Zhang Li sauntered back into the female dormitory. She shoved the wooden dorm door open roughly with a bang, letting in a gust of cold sea wind. She strode to the corner and ripped open the floral curtain in front of Shangxia's bed. Shangxia huddled under the quilt, her almond eyes slightly reddened, gazing at her in apparent panic. Zhang Li folded her arms and looked down at her, triumphant joy shining in her eyes. Shangxia, don't say I didn't warn you as your cousin. Everyone now regards you as someone of poor character. Your reputation is completely destroyed. Still, Aunt Li is a kind woman. She said she will come to the youth quarters tomorrow with betrothal gifts to save you and ask you to marry her son Ergo. Zhang Li leaned close to the bed, a malicious smile spreading across her face. You'd better accept your fate and agree to the marriage, or the brigade leader might parade you through the village. Shangxia drew her shoulders inward, clutching the quilt tightly with trembling hands. Yet the instant Zhang Li turned away, the panic in her lowered eyes vanished without a trace. A cold, meaningful smirk slowly tugged at her pale lips, unseen by Zhang Li. Early the next morning, the flimsy wooden gate of the youth quarters shook violently under heavy kicks. Right after that, shrill, frantic gong and drum blares exploded in the courtyard. Fellow villagers, educated youth comrades, come out and see. Aunt Li shouted at the top of her grating voice inside the earthen courtyard. In her left hand, she held a scrawny dead chicken with pale, upturned eyes and barely any feathers. Her right hand clutched a yellowed coarse cloth sack filled with roughly 2 gin of mixed grain, grit, and chaff mixed in with the grain. "I've come in good faith to propose a marriage to Comrade Xing," Aunt Li yelled, tossing the stiff dead chicken onto the ground. "Comrade Shangxia may have questionable conduct and wander into the woods instead of working. But our Li family is kind-hearted. We cannot bear to watch a young person go astray. I've brought Ergu here today to marry her, to guide her onto the right path and give her a chance to reform." Villagers and educated youths heading off to work crowded around the courtyard walls, craning their necks. They held large ceramic bowls, pointing and whispering at the dead chicken and gritty grain on the ground. Zhang Li leaned against the wing room doorframe, chewing hard-dried sweet potatoes, relishing the spectacle. Li Ergu had put on a faded Zhongshan suit stained with black grime around the collar. His small eyes darted everywhere, saliva nearly dripping onto his collar. "Ergu, go fetch your bride out." Aunt Li shifted her heavy frame and urged him loudly. Elated, Li Ergu ambled toward Xingxia's wooden door. "Xingxia, Ergu brother has brought fine grain for you. Come out and head home to marry me." The wooden door creaked open a crack. Xingxia stepped out, wearing an oversized gray cotton jacket. Her face looked pale under the morning light, her eyes badly swollen. Bright teardrops clung to her thick eyelashes. She resembled a delicate white lily ready to wilt in the rain. The sight of her tearful, fragile form made Li Ergu's knees go weak. He rubbed his dirty hands, fingernails packed with black mud, and leaned forward greedily. "Oh, my dear sister, your crying tugs at my heart." Li Ergu stretched out his filthy hand, reaching for Shangxia's fair wrist. "Come home with me, and I'll let you eat chicken legs every meal." The foul side of that black-nailed hand churned Shangxia's stomach. A faint cold glint flashed in her reddened almond eyes. Her right hand slipped quietly deep inside the wide sleeve of her cotton jacket. Hidden beneath the fabric, a matte black handheld stun gun with faint blue electric sparks at its tip settled firmly in her grasp. If this loathsome man touched her, she would subject him to the jolt of his life. Don't come closer." Shangxia trembled violently like a leaf caught in the cold wind, stepping weakly backward. "Comrade Li Ergu, the brigade headquarters has not issued a marriage certificate. You are behaving improperly." Her voice trembled, thick with sobs. Zhang Li, watching from the side, raised her voice to jeer. "Shangxia, Aunt Li has already brought betrothal gifts. Stop pretending to be pure. Your reputation is in tatters. Apart from Ergu, who would want you?" Villagers outside the courtyard murmured among themselves, public sentiment already tilted against her. Shangxia lowered her eyelids, sneering silently to herself. Too many onlookers filled the courtyard. If she used the stun gun out in the open, this device foreign to the era would arouse endless suspicion. The brigade militia would not hesitate to investigate, and exposing her secret would spell disaster. She needed to shift the confrontation elsewhere. Shangxia bit her pale lower lip, and large tears spilled down her cheeks. "Woo-woo, you're all bullying me," she let out a faint, mournful whimper, covering her face like a frightened fawn. She stumbled out of the courtyard gate, fleeing down the overgrown woodland trail behind the youth quarters. Li Ergu had been eager to get close to her. Seeing Shangxia run tearfully toward the secluded woods, he assumed the young woman was merely shy and wished to speak with him privately away from the crowd. "Shangxia, wait for me. I'll take good care of you." Li Ergu let out a wild shout, pounding across the dirt ground in pursuit, his face twisted with greed. Zhang Li and the envious educated youths stood in the backyard, watching the pair vanish into the trees and snickering. "Run all you like. Once you're deep in the woods, she won't be able to keep her dignity." Zhang Li spat, overwhelmed with satisfaction. If Shangxia was left alone with Li Ergu among the trees, the marriage would be sealed. The obnoxious delicate girl would disappear from the youth quarters forever. Meanwhile, Shangxia moved swiftly through the barren woodland in her white canvas shoes. She ran steadily, her fair lower legs striding smoothly, bearing no trace of the frail despair she had displayed in the courtyard. She listened as Li Ergu's heavy panting and the crunch of broken branches drew nearer. Shangxia lifted the corner of her eyes slightly. She mentally connected to the vast mall inside her mind. A white radar screen unfolded in her consciousness, green scanning lines spinning rapidly. A small green dot glowed on the display, marking a life signal moving steadily and quickly toward the air raid medical sentry post. Shangxia silently counted down the seconds in her head. 30 seconds until Jiangji reaches the medical sentry post on his patrol.